This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney on a Friday, moving into next week, moving into the great bull market. Down 50,000 on the horizon as well. We got a bunch of great strategists today.
Yes.
We don't have any super bears. We don't have the quiet bears that are going, what happened?
Yeah, but it's tough to beat.
We have Francois Trahan with us and Terry Weissman as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to take a look at this market here. Futures, Tom, just kind of not much happening in the futures market right here. Markets are pretty calm here after the big move we've had this week. A lot of economic data, a lot of earnings data this week for the market to digest.
It wasn't the big announcement at Walmart. I mean, I'm sorry. There's a lot done there. Oliver Chen put some love on it. Some of the sell side said single best idea on Walmart is just as you said yesterday. It's America.
It's America. And I'm going for the floor walk tomorrow to check out the Walmart in Brick Township, New Jersey. We'll see how that goes. See if I can get into any trouble there.
We'll have to see. Lindsey Piegza is my interview of the day on at 8:30 this morning. All of you tune in for that. On Apple CarPlay, on Android, and on YouTube. We have had a spectacular and global week on YouTube. We're learning with Google about this each and every day. It's a new distribution. What you do is you go out, you subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts, you search Bloomberg Podcasts. There we are. We've got our replay 2 hour. Have you ever listened to the replay 2 hour?
I do. And
56 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. It's great stuff.
Mateo stars, you know.
Of course, yeah, the newspaper segment.
You know, it's all the
they
newspaper.
lead with that.
We're anticipating the newspaper segments. I haven't seen the briefing note.
It's going to be sponsored. I bet,
well, the interns. You notice like we have 4 interns and 3 of them are out today.
Yeah, I know. It's Friday. I mean,
it's Friday. I mean, what did they do under the bridge down by Grand Central Station last night? We say good morning to all of our interns, particularly those from Chapel Hill. We're the Interactive Broker Studios. Thank you, Interactive Brokers, for real commitment to what we do in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. The Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And futures begin the last trading day of the week. Little change, but near record territory after the Dow Jones Industrial Average hit 40,000 mark before starting to pull back. Now, we have more economic data. Fed speak had a lot to do with it. The presidents of the Federal Reserve Banks of New York, Cleveland, Atlanta, Richmond, they all hinted that interest rates will need to stay higher for longer. Now, on the economic calendar for today, the Conference Board issues a report on the U.S. economic outlook. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures at 18,667 mark. Dow futures at the 40,000 mark. And we have S&P futures at 5,320. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.78%. Little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%. And that's up 1 basis point. Going to social media company Reddit. That's moving the markets up 16%. It made a pact with OpenAI to bring content to ChatGPT. And then you have software maker Snowflake. They're down about 1% right now. It's in talks to acquire startup Reka AI for more than $1 billion. And Take-Two Interactive down 3%. It announced its latest Grand Theft Auto video game. Well, it's not going to be released until the fall of 2025, and that reduces booking forecast for the current fiscal year. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. We only have Laura Ram on when the Philadelphia Phillies are the best team in baseball. Which, you know, with the Dodgers is sort of where we are right now. We're joining us now. She's just iconic in foreign exchange and, of course, a greater economic strategy as well for FS Investments. Laura, what I love about your notes is you'll go blah, 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 and then there's one single sentence. And the 3% sentence is buried down here. My year-end CPI forecast is 3%. Which wins out in the tug of war, Laura? Higher inflation and the angst of it, or that creates a decent nominal GDP and we go towards Dow 50,000?
You know, I think that's why, and this question is exactly why we have such a strong equity market today. I think if any of us had thought at the beginning of the year when 7 rate cuts were priced in, that we were going to pull back almost all of that and still have these record highs, people are forgetting how important the growth story is to this equity market. I think they're still thinking it's a Fed rate cut story. And this is where I think today's news, right. Everyone looked at CPI. I think they overlooked retail sales. I think the economy is going to slow down somewhat. And, bringing it back to 3%, I don't think that inflation is going to cool enough for the Fed to have this generous room for maneuvering. They clearly want to cut rates. They clearly want to cut rates. They're going to try to sneak one in.
To look ahead here, Paul, and this is to me the arch debate, which I've brought up for months, everybody's Fed-centric, money-centric, interest rate-centric. And what Laura Rahm's saying is it's about the real economy on the IS curve. I'm sorry, it's about real economy dynamics now.
So, Laura, looking at the economic data we had this week here, how do you think about inflation here? Again, January, February, March, kind of higher than expected inflation data points. But maybe this week we got a little bit of a reprieve. How do you think about inflation?
Inflation data right now is like the greatest Rorschach test anywhere. Everybody's just, I think, looking at this sea of data and trying to cherry pick whatever fits their story. It's a mixed bag. You have a lot of the, inflation expectations indicators have, now really shot up and are moving the wrong way. You have wages that are still too hot. Unit labor costs, didn't move in the right direction. Employment cost index, the Fed's favorite measure for sort of like that cost of people, that cost of hiring people. So, I think the latest CPI data certainly was welcome. We've had so many upside surprises that we needed kind of, it doesn't come up heads every time. You're going to get tails. But the report in and of itself is still a report not consistent with 2% inflation. Listen, I think we're kind of stuck at this higher than 2%, sort of hotter than we should be comfortable with inflation numbers. Is it the end of the world if the economy slows a lot? The Fed could absolutely cut against this backdrop. I just don't see the urgency given, clearly financial markets are still experiencing a lot of liquidity. There's no strain out there. There's no urgency to cut. But again, it could really come down to sort of, they feel like they want to. And I think one piece that really maybe we do need to watch is the consumer delinquencies and the fact that long-term interest rates may become the sort of shadow focus in a world where people are really stressed by these higher credit card rates, higher auto loans, and that delinquencies, I think, a weight on consumption.
So the retail sales number you mentioned earlier, again, it did come in weaker than expected, but then, boy, at the same time, we had some pretty good numbers out of Walmart yesterday. So how do you kind of think about the consumer here?
Yeah, that's a really critical question because a lot of people in my seat have been expecting the consumer to slow. And really, the current pace of consumption is unsustainable. We see the savings rate coming down. We see excess savings from the pandemic boost exhausted. And finally, we see, wage gains still healthy, but certainly normalizing. And, historically, people kind of spend most of what they earn. So it's really rare to have that consumption still be stronger than real wage gains. So you put it all together and you think, sure, consumers should slow. And we've been hearing whispers of that from the credit card numbers. And that's, to me, is the second half of the year because we're starting, the fact that consumer delinquencies are so high at a time when the economy is so strong is a reason to worry. The fact that credit card rates are so high and you're seeing a real dispersion with some of that delinquency there. So it has to slow in my book.
Laura, thank you so much. Laura Rahm with FS Investments getting us started today. We got Lucas Shaw coming in. So, of course, what do? I turn to Hollywood Reporter, trying to keep up with what he's doing. And I love the 8 takeaways from the upfronts in Hollywood Reporter, like what Lucas is doing. Quote, Bob Iger takes a victory lap. Only in Hollywood can you take a victory lap. When I look at the Disney stock price from about 200 down to 80, with a Mickey Mouse bounce up to 120, and now a recent rollover as well. What are they smoking out there?
I don't know. And what's interesting about Bob Iger coming at the upfronts, I don't recall in my career, 30 years, him ever being on stage at an upfront. which shows you.
What does that mean?
What
I mean,
that
Lucas
shows you
will
is,
tell us, but
yeah,
you know.
I mean, they are desperate to get advertisers to spend money on their networks in a business, thanks to cord cutting, that is less and less efficient for advertisers, but they're still trying to get as many dollars as they can.
Jimmy Kimmel making a splash there as well. We'll have Lucas Shaw with us on later this morning with our news in New York City. Michael Buck.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. At least 4 people were killed and more than 800,000 customers in Texas are without power after an intense rainstorm swept through the Houston area. The school district canceled classes today. Last night, Houston Mayor John Whitmire had a plea for non-essential workers.
Stay at home. Houstonians, stay at home tonight. The recovery will go through to tomorrow. So if you're a non-essential worker, don't go to work tomorrow. I ask the business community to be considerate of their employees.
Mayor Whitmire says the damage is also extensive, with windows in high-rise buildings having blown out and trees were downed. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee voted late last night to recommend a contempt of Congress resolution against Attorney General Merrick Garland for his failure to turn over audio recordings of special counsel Robert Hur's interview with President Joe Biden. The vote came after a tense and chaotic session as members traded personal attacks. At one point, Democrat Jamie Raskin of Maryland called out Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene over a comment she made about Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett's fake eyelashes.
And I would ask Ms. Greene if she would just make the apology. It's not that complicated. We don't want to get into face-to-face insults.
You will never get an apology out of me. I don't owe
then
you
I
one.
object. Then I object, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Raskins objects.
Crockett later posted, "This is what happens when mentally deficient people who can't read and follow the rules or just don't give a damn somehow end up in Congress." Finally, after round 1 in the PGA Championship, Xander Schauffele leads at Valhalla at 9 under, Tiger Woods at 1 over. Today, we will broadcast live play-by-play after the U.S. markets close on Bloomberg Radio and all through the weekend. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I mean, between the 4 of us, it's like a celebrity lodestone. Each of us got a different thing going on the weekend. I mean, Barr, it's unbelievable culture center, the nexus that his house is. Sweeney and I are on the same page, Michael. We're watching Mr. Ripley, black and white.
Awesome. I saw the first episode yesterday, Tom, on the train ride. I'm hooked. I just downloaded episodes 2 and 3.
Steven Zalian is the one that put this miracle together. Folks, if you haven't seen it, it's purposely slow because it's that neo-noir. It's like Humphrey Bogart. It's like post-Casablanca kind of thing. This is a guy that wrote Schindler's List. This is the guy that co-wrote Moneyball. So you got a hugely talented force making this thing go for Andrew Scott, the actor.
Well, you got to, I'm with Lisa. I had never even heard of this thing.
All right, well, first of all, start off by going to watch this weekend the movie from 1999.
Right.
Matt Damon.
Talented Mr. Ripley. Matt Damon, Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
I mean, just big stars, great story. That'll set the stage. And then come back to Netflix.
I like that, Paul. Our social director for the weekend. Go see Matt Damon and then go see this totally twisted wacko thing. It's sort of like our show.
Exactly.
We could do a remote to wherever they are.
Yourself.
There are buried bodies we don't know about. It's kind of like the show.
I mean, that's just what it is. Red and green on the screen. NASDAQ showing us some green. The VIX, 12.38. It's a bull market. Bloomberg surveillance.
headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Build America Mutual, insures U.S. municipal bonds that finance essential American infrastructure and provides guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Be part of Building America. Invest in BAM insured bonds. All right, over to the markets right now. We have S&P futures, Dow futures, NASDAQ futures, all little change. But we do have NASDAQ futures at 18,661, Dow futures 39,995, and S&P futures at 5,319. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%, little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that is up 2 basis points. Quick look at commodities. We have spot gold higher at $2,386 an ounce. Brent crude $83 a barrel. WTI crude $79 a barrel. Companies making news. That's Microsoft. This headline coming across the Bloomberg. Word that the UK won't investigate its partnership with Mistral AI, and we have shares up 0.3% right there. And then Boeing, their shares up 0.2%, and this is ahead of its annual meeting today. Executives likely face a lot of questions about canceled orders and also safety issues on top of that. And a milestone of sorts. The world's 15 richest people, well, they're worth at least $100 billion. That's according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. We really pieced together the team. We had a huge meeting yesterday. I don't think you were there. No. We did an hour-and-a-half meeting about how to frame out Friday to get into the rest of May, get to the June 12 Fed meeting, and we wanted to put together guests that were very separate and idiosyncratic, but the key thing was they're experienced and they have a belief, they have an opinion. That would be Terry Weissman, first person we booked, with Macquarie, legendary at Bear Stearns, and we're thrilled that Dr. Weissman could join us this morning. What does the instabilities, the cacophony of EM mean to you right now? It was your wheelhouse with Emmy Shio years ago at Bear Stearns. Do you look at EM discrete from the Fed in our markets, or are they linked?
They're definitely linked. In fact, there's some central banks, Tom, that pay particular attention to what the Fed is doing as well as what the other developed market central banks are doing, and that dictates policy to some extent. I mean, I'm an expert in Latin America, or at least I'd like to think I am. If you look at the Mexican central bank, even though they don't say it explicitly, they certainly look at what the Fed does. And one of the reasons they've been hawkish recently is because they sense that the Fed has delayed. Certainly, that's been the change in the tone of the Fed since January. And that's made it more hawkish. And as a result, you've seen some strength in the Mexican peso, for example. So you'll find examples from time to time of this style of leadership of the Fed among the emerging markets, but it's not every emerging market.
We've waited. Risha Sharma, maybe at Morgan Stanley, now at Rockefeller's led on this. Is there finally a commodity lift with what we see with copper?
Oh, I would definitely say that the terms of trade improvement for some countries has been significant. Now, the question is not whether or not some countries can benefit from the increase in the price of copper. The question is whether the increase in the price of copper is fundamentally driven and will stay high, or whether it's being driven by some short covering or some other technical features, and it's going to roll over very soon, in which case the benefit to those countries is not going to last. But I can tell you, for example, that in the emerging markets, if you're looking for a copper play, Chile is that play in South America. And yes, we've seen the Chilean peso rally in the last 2 weeks with this copper rally. It hasn't rallied very much, I think, because I think some investors think that the copper rally is temporary. But it has definitely had an impact on the currency.
We had some inflation data this week with CPI. We also had some retail sales data. Anything, when you looked at this data this week, does it suggest that this Fed may be able to be cutting rates this year? How do you think about that?
It's not impossible, Paul, but I think we're going to need to see much more of a decline in inflation, more of a conversion to disinflation. What I wrote after I saw the U.S. CPI number for April is that the market's reaction was more hype than substance. Remember, to get to converge to 2% inflation, we really need to see core PCE inflation below 0.2% on a monthly basis. And it probably needs to stay there for at least 3 months, because we had 3 months of topside inflation. Right. So the symmetry dictates that we need to see at least 3 prints that are low. And given that there's noise in the series, the idea that we're going to see 3 consecutive prints is low, the probability of that. And therefore, we really are talking about the earliest rate cut, in our view, can be coming maybe into December, but our baseline view is that it happens next year.
Off your remit, but nevertheless important, what's the nature, the character of this equity bull market?
Oh, that it's driven, at least recently, by the premise that the Fed is going to cut rates. I think that, and by the decline in inflation, of course, that we saw last year, which is the premise for the eventual cutting of rates. The stock market wants to see lower inflation. Remember, the reason we had a big rally last year is because the market did not anticipate the decline in inflation that we saw last year.
Right.
And when that happened, the market took off. If we see more high inflation prints, I do believe that you're going to see a sell-off in this market.
Now, dovetail that, and I'm going back to Bear again and say Malpass hysterical about the deficit. We had triple stimulus, and we've had a oomph, this nominal GDP, which has been growthiness for the market. Does that subside?
Well, the issue in the U.S., and I think the reason why we continue to see what people would call inefficacy for monetary policy. In other words, why is monetary policy restricted, but we still haven't seen a sufficient decline in aggregate demand? I think that does have to do with what you touched on, Tom, which is that although monetary policy may be restricted, fiscal policy certainly isn't. These 6% deficits in the U.S. are causing the economy to be stronger than it otherwise would, at least in the short term, and it's putting added pressure on the Fed to keep interest rates high. And it's one reason why we don't think the Fed is going to be cutting this year.
You know, just looking at the, Tom and I have been talking about over the last, 10 days, 2 weeks is the yen here and the weakness in the yen. What's your call there? What's happening? I mean, Macquarie Bank, Australia, I know you guys have a vested interest here.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the positions of traders reports that the CFTC in the U.S. issues, and you look at it for the contract on the yen, what you find is that the market is excessively short the yen right now. It's as if the market wants to see this trend continue. But of course, that's a dangerous situation to be in if you want to go long dollar yen, if you want to short yen, because everyone is already positioned in that direction. I would not be long dollar yen. I think that it's treacherous at this point to do so. If we see another intervention, it could be an intervention that pushes the pair lower by 2%.
Dr. Weissman, we've got to cut you short. We've got breaking news, but thank you for coming in. I hope you can come in next week as well. I think some of these challenges are going to still be here. Paul, this golfer is from New Jersey.
Yes.
And I guess there's a folks paw, which Michael Barr is going to report on right now.
Yeah, Michael Barr, Bloomberg. What's going on with Scottie Scheffler down there at the PGA Championship?
Yeah, the world's #1 golfer. Apparently, he was detained by police and was in handcuffs. It apparently happened with a misunderstanding with traffic flow and his attempt to drive past a police officer into the Valhalla Golf Club just before the start of the second round of the PGA Championship. Now, we got to go back a little earlier because at 5 a.m., an unidentified man was attempting to cross Shelbyville Road outside the gate to the club, and then he was struck by a bus in a bus lane, and then that man died at the scene. Yep. So later on, here comes Scheffler, and apparently he tried to go around the officer, according to ESPN. And apparently the officer let him know, it's like, you can't do that, and he started screaming at him, according to the report. Told him to get out of the car, shoved him against the car, and then he was handcuffed. The start is going to be delayed a little bit. They were supposed to go around 7 a.m., but that got delayed because of this tragedy.
Do we have any reporting that he's been quote unquote arrested, or is it just they're just trying to get to the opening of the
Not
PGA?
saying arrested, seeing that he was detained briefly by his car. So I'm not saying that. Of course, this is developing. We're going to have more on this as we go along.
Difficult. Michael Barr, thank you so much. We'll have much more on that. And look for our coverage of the PGA after the market close. Bloomberg giving you this strange thing, golf on radio. It works.
It works. It does.
That's all I know as well. One of the things we're following, thanks, Jess Menton, for the brief this morning. I really appreciate it. But, Paul, I'm sorry. I mean, you and I were younger. We read Reminiscence of a Stock Operator for the first time. And then 5 years later, we read it a second time, and it was totally different. If I read Reminiscence of a Stock Operator today, what does it say about GameStop?
GameStop put out some preliminary first quarter net sales, $872 million to $892 million versus $1.237 last year, a decline of 11%. So revenue's coming in weaker, but stock is down 8% here in pre-market trading here. So, I mean, there's a fundamental data point out there for GameStop.
I mean, Bill Gross is making out like a bandit. Maybe he'll buy Mexico. Red and green on the screen. Stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are little change on this last trading day of the week. We'll head over to the bond market right now. The 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up 2 basis points. We'll take it to the 30-year at 4.54%, and that's up 2 basis points. Over to commodities. Spot gold, that's higher at $2,388 an ounce. We have Brent crude at $83 a barrel. WTI crude, $79 a barrel. What's moving the markets? Well, we have Applied Materials. They're down about 0.5%, but its forecast, it failed to live up to expectations after the stock's 32% year-to-date rally. And after a 2-day, $7 billion wipeout, meme stocks, specifically GameStop, AMC, they were on the move, but now back down, and that's because GameStop's preliminary first quarter results missed estimates. We have GameStop down about 12% right now, and AMC is down nearly 2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. This guest needs an introduction. I mean, Paul, graduation, NYU. Last year they had Taylor Swift. This year they have Ken Langone. Who lost out? Kevin Gordon lost out. Ken Langone, we love you. Come on the show. I need a lecture from Ken Langone. Maybe we get Taylor Swift on the show as well. I love the academic attire at NYU. Folks, it's great in Midtown Manhattan. The purple robes, the light blue robes, the Columbia, whatever. It's all great. Baruch.
We're running around
and the rest of it.
In the subway.
The fee, yeah, in the subway. The fee for a master, their parents are like, oh my God, New York. The fee for a master's gown, hood, cap, and tassel is $79 plus shipping. Did Liz Ann Saunders buy your gown for you?
She did not. I bought it myself.
You bought it yourself?
I did it all myself.
Okay, here's a dirty little secret, folks. Beside every legend like Liz Ann, and Liz Ann's getting ready for Robert Plant June 20th out at Jones Beach. There's somebody actually working a day job. He's Kevin Gordon, who does the world-class Twitter feed of Liz Ann Saunders. Has she ever tweeted in her life?
Yes, of course. Of
really?
course she has. Yes,
You're doing her charts.
It's a team effort. She and I, we're working together.
Keep it up.
Yes.
You do her charts. What's the most important chart right now?
I think the most important chart is actually one that goes out daily for her, and we look at it every morning. It's the first one I pull up, which is longer-term breadth for the equity market in the U.S.
Are we breadthing?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about this pullback that we had early in the year, 5.5% so far has been the max drawdown. So relatively mild, relative to history. But in that whole instance, the lowest you got in terms of the percentage of stocks on the S&P 500 above their 200-day moving average was about mid-60%. Now you're back up to 80. So to us, when you look at and you zoom out on that chart, the longer-term breadth picture looks relatively healthy. So it sort of confirms to me, at least, that pullback was just a normal pullback in an ongoing uptrend.
Yeah, a lot of people thought maybe we'd see more, but it seems like that was it here. We had retail sales yesterday. We'll get to the CPI at some point. But retail sales came in weaker than expected. But some people were telling me, like Gina Martin Adams from Bloomberg Intelligence, don't worry about it. What do you guys think of retail sales?
I side with that because, yes, if you look at the step down from the prior month to the current month, going to flat, obviously that's concerning, especially if you look at the control group, which was negative. That's the one that matters most for GDP and the consumption component. But I look at it more of a normalization. I mean, still, if you're looking at the 3-month growth for retail sales, you're above 1%. That's still relatively healthy. I know when you factor in some of the inflation aspect on the good side, you're not as strong in terms of real growth. But I think that helped kind of temper some fears that we're overheating in terms of consumption, especially in conjunction with what was a better than expected CPI report. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a complete reversal of the trend from the first quarter, but I do think that that was a healthy report.
The question I always ask Lizanne, I'll ask it to you, and just I mean seriously, in the last week, if not month, what are the flows of what people are doing at Charles Schwab? What are they actually doing with their money?
So the stock is still the case that you're heavily exposed, broadly from an investor perspective, heavily exposed to the growthy areas, the tech, communication services, to some extent consumer discretionary, parts of the market. Flows, you're starting to see a little bit more creep into the deeper cyclicals, industrials, materials, not as much financials and energy. So there's, I think, still a lack of convincing on the part of, at least when we look at our investors, that you have seen a leadership shift, or you're able to see a leadership shift. And I think, a lot of it has to do with when you look at the nature of the bull market that we've been in since October of 2022, the first year of that bull market in many ways was quite weak. You had a lack of participation from areas like small caps and deeper cyclicals, which, regardless of if you're coming out of a recession or not in history, you're always supposed to see those areas do quite well, and in many instances outperform the mega caps and the techs of the world. So I think that, and the fact that it has continued for so long, up until, call it, last October, has been a reason that we've seen, a hesitance on the part of investors to step into those areas.
All right, so what do we do here? Do we just do what Tom Keene's been doing, which is in the Magnificent Seven, just taking it to the bank every single day, or do we try to find some value out there in some of these in the market here? Because, boy, we've had a nice run off of October. We've had a nice 2024. Where do we go here?
Well, even with the Magnificent Seven, I think the trouble of looking at that, as a monolith, doesn't serve can serve investors actually pretty poorly, because you look at the names in just that group. This year, you've got huge dispersion in performance, with areas like or companies like Nvidia doing quite well, but then you've got Tesla literally bringing up the rear. In many instances so far this year, the worst performer in the S&P 500, let alone that group of the Mag 7. So, since October, you've already seen a really healthy broadening out of the market, from a sector perspective, from a factor perspective. So our sector model is heavily weighted towards financials, energy, materials.
Really?
You have more of a deeper value cyclical play.
I want you to talk to the Ute of America. You're this strange thing, which is actually a Ute out of Pepperdine and NYU that's actually studied the history of it. You don't work for Liz Ann Saunders if you haven't done that. What do the kids get wrong? You're having a beverage of your choice Friday. I mean, he doesn't even do work from home. He's the only one that's downtown
I'm
Manhattan.
5 days. I'm 5 days.
5 days a week in the office.
Sometimes
Talk
6.
to the people like you. What do they get wrong about this bull market right now?
Well, I think the evidenced by maybe what we've seen earlier this week, just sometimes the convincing nature of some of these eye-popping gains that you see in some stocks, and call it a cult of equity.
Druckenmiller got out of Nvidia yesterday, or that was the line.
Even the meme craze. I mean, you'd be surprised, maybe not. As,
wait. Liz Ann's listening. You're not day trading meme stocks off your desk.
No, but I mean just the anecdotes out there, and still this kind of cult of equity that exists that we started to see certainly in early of 21 when you went through that craze. It wasn't as pervasive now because it wasn't consistent with the S&P roaring.
Does the pandemic matter, and that it was affected because we were all home sitting on a couch like Lisa's kids?
Absolutely.
And now it's different?
No, I think that was a shifting moment for it. Yeah.
Okay, we got to do this. Paul brought this up, and it's a research that only Sweeney can do. I can't fathom graduation at Pepperdine. I mean, you got to be kidding me. I mean, Madison Square Garden, Ken Langone, and NYU is a letdown. What's a Pepperdine graduate like out in the bubble of Pepperdine?
Well, the graduation itself is magnificent. You have the backdrop of the Pacific Ocean. We're up on a hill. It's in a rolling green field. It's amazing.
Who was your commencement speaker? Like Oprah?
No, the commencement speaker actually was our outgoing president, Andy Benton, who was retiring with my class. So it was a really special moment for us. It was amazing. But out of the Pepperdine bubble, it was great because I got to come to New York and I got to experience a pace that was certainly the opposite of what I had in undergrad. So it was phenomenal. I got the best of both worlds: 4 years in Malibu and now more than 5 in New York.
Do you surf?
A little bit. I grew up more wake surfing because I grew up near a lake.
Lisa, in 30 years, I've never asked that on here.
But we could go surfing together. We've got waves. We can all go.
Like you're in finance at Pepperdine, and you take a surfing break to go out before.
I had a surf class.
You had a surf class.
Absolutely, it counted as a credit.
Lisa's taking notes.
It was exactly 1 credit, but I had a surf class. Yeah.
Kevin Gordon, seriously, from all of us, and Paul's living this in real time with his horde. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Huge academic accommodation.
Thank you.
Half of Wall Street, Tom, comes out of the NYU Stern School.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere.
It's actually rigorous. Tania came out of the combine. She's showing me her notes one time. Can you help me with this? And I said, well, actually, no, I can't.
No.
Great
school. The Stern School of Business is just
very cool. I got one pro tip for employment at Schwab.
Yes.
Whenever they say it, you say, I love Led Zeppelin. I can't believe what they did on their second album. That's how you win.
Exactly.
Kevin Gordon, congratulations on a big day for you and your family.
Thank you.
At NYU.
Thanks so much.
Paul's buying lunch.
Where are the kids at NYU? They know it. They know. I mean, the NYU kids coming out of the business school, I mean, they have such great opportunities, spending 2 years in New York City, all the alumni.
Yeah, but Courant is the heritage there to the late Peter Carr and Bruno DePere here at Bloomberg. And all I can say, folks, is NYU's got this party school film thing going, and the mathematical rigor is tangible. It's tangible.
But what's great, just for our listeners and viewers, today in New York City, when NYU graduates, there's tens of thousands of these people running around the street, all in their gowns, and they're walking around Midtown Manhattan, because the graduations of the various schools are yours, MSG for the Stern School, it's Yankee Stadium, it's all over the city, and they're walking around in their gowns, they're in the subway, they're on the buses, they're everywhere.
It'd be nice to Mr. Langone, no protests as well. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The world's #1 golfer, Scottie Scheffler, was detained by police in handcuffs after a misunderstanding with traffic flow. According to ESPN, Scheffler attempted to drive past a police officer into Valhalla Golf Club before the start of the second round of the PGA Championship in Louisville. Before Scheffler arrived, police were on the scene after a shuttle bus struck and killed a pedestrian outside the golf club. Meanwhile, after round one, Xander Schauffele leads at 9 under, Tiger Woods at 1 over. Today, we will broadcast live play-by-play after the U.S. markets close on Bloomberg Radio and, of course, all through the weekend. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee voted late last night to recommend a contempt of Congress resolution against Attorney General Merrick Garland for his failure to turn over audio recordings of the special counsel Robert Hur interview with President Joe Biden. The vote came after an ugly session as members traded personal attacks. Democrats came to Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett's defense after this comment from Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order.
Later, Crockett fired back after Greene's words remained in the record.
If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
Crockett later posted, "This is what happens when mentally deficient people who can't read and follow rules or just don't give a damn somehow end up in Congress." Slovak's defense minister says the country's prime minister has undergone another operation after he was shot on Wednesday and remains in serious condition today. Robert Fico, who is 59, was shot multiple times as he was greeting supporters after a government meeting in the former coal mining town of Handlova. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, on this bull market, and what's great about it, the levels again, folks, 5,297 on S&P 500, 18,005 on NASDAQ, 39,869 on the Dow is, in this, silencing the bears, I get that. But Paul, what's extraordinary to me is we slug through earnings season after earnings season. There's been more than a reason. It's just not going to be that good. It's going to miss. It's going to miss. And it hasn't missed.
That's why, Tom, I think we're fortunate to be able to chat with people like Gina Martin Adams, who kind of really dives into what's driving, earnings out there in the marketplace. And she's been so right on this is a solid earnings environment for corporate America. And just 2 or 3 weeks ago, she came into the studio and says, forget about the 8 to 9% EPS growth that the street's looking for. We think it's going to be closer to 12, 13, 14%. She was right again.
Did I go to the wrong school? The Pepperdine Club surf team?
Yeah.
It's a varsity sport.
It's a thing.
Surf team.
Sure.
For college credit.
There we go. There's the proper comment. Lisa Mateo,
baby.
thanks for that. Futures up 3. It's Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are a little changed, but near record territory. We have Dow futures at the 40,000 mark, NASDAQ futures at 18,674, S&P futures at 5,323. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's little change. And the 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up 2 basis points. Spot gold higher at $2,387 an ounce. We have Brent crude $83 a barrel, WTI crude $79 a barrel. Moving the markets, we'll take Two Interactive. They're down nearly 3%. It announced its latest Grand Theft Auto video game. Well, it's not going to be released until the fall of 2025. And Cracker Barrel, they're down 14%. Reduced its quarterly dividend. Also sees fourth quarter results coming below expectations because fewer people are going through their doors. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
It's a publicly traded stock.
Darn right.
Yeah.
And here's the stat I love about Cracker Barrel. It's not the exact number of people, so don't hold me to it.
Okay.
But like 80 to 90% or 90% or more of their restaurants are within 1 mile of an interstate.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
They're
that's
right
true.
there. That's their model. You
Because
get off the
we're
road
go
on a trip.
cross country.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's what
I was
you're
going
supposed
down to
to.
Nashville
That's
once, and I saw it in the distance, and I didn't have my glasses on. I'm blind, and I thought it was a French restaurant. I'll find something. I go, La Barrel de Crack, great. The stock hasn't worked out in 10 years. It's negative 1% per year.
Yeah.
What's going wrong? I mean, Lisa, how
You
many
get the
times
country
do you eat it?
ham, the biscuits and gravy.
Oh, gosh. I'm
yeah.
Gravy. Like
We're
everything
taking
is
it.
gravy,
We're
right?
taking Lisa. I'm taking Lisa to the one out.
I mean, I'm getting hungry listening to this. There isn't one on the island of Manhattan?
No.
No.
And I'm not sure there's anything there that Lisa will eat. We'll have to figure something out.
That's
Everything
true.
is smothered in something.
Yes.
I don't know.
Gravy.
I mean,
Yep.
Good
stuff, sausage, gravy.
They got 77,000 employees at La Barrel de Crack.
This is big. I'm telling you.
Their prices are pretty good, though. I can tell you.
People flock.
It's a good
They got-
bargain.
Just unbelievable.
Yep.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
She's got 77 papers at her desk. It's stacked up. You can barely see Lisa at 5 a.m. putting this together. Your daily look at the front pages. Around the world, brought to you by Interactive Brokers Bond Marketplace. Access our vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities, no markups or built-in spreads, and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. Lisa, what do you got?
Okay, you're going to like this one. Cassette tapes making a comeback in the music
Here we
industry.
go.
Yes, okay.
I still have my collection.
Those in the music biz, they say the majority is not the older generations, but it's the younger generation.
Okay.
Because shows like Stranger Things, Guardians in the Galaxy, that feature cassettes like in their shows and movies, that's sparking that younger generation. Taylor Swift, she sold 21,500 cassettes from her latest release. But you have Billie Eilish, Dua Lipa, Kendrick Lamar. They're all going to cassettes.
But who has cassette players these days?
That's finding the cassette player. But the reason why, I'm like, so what's the thing? So artists are saying that lower production costs, okay, new releases on vinyl can cost about $35, cassettes as low as $10. But they're also saying cassette sales had a bigger impact on chart position. I'm not sure how that plays out.
I mean, I get the vinyl thing. I mean, I'd rather listen to Tidal or something incredibly beautifully done digital, particularly through tubes. But I get vinyl. Paul, remember the celebration when we got rid of cassettes?
Well, going from 8-track to cassettes
That's Tucker.
That was evolution.
Yeah, Tucker's still using 8-track.
But 8-tracks to cassettes was like unbelievable technological leap.
The size, yeah.
And then
And
cassettes
then Dolby
to
C,
CDs.
Dolby D, Dolby S, Dolby, and the answer is it sucked.
I just hated when it came out and then you had to take your pencil
Yes.
and like go like this.
Exactly.
And, like,
So
try
if
and
I
reel
go
it back up
to
again.
Brooklyn this week and there's going to be somebody in a $200 plaid shirt
David Gura.
telling me I need to buy cassettes.
Yep.
You gotta buy them.
Yep.
Gura does
They're
this.
best.
I know he does.
I think it's a big take coming up.
He's our guy.
Lo-fi with
Yep.
David Gura. Next.
When you go to the airport, here's the thing. And do you bring your car? Do you take an Uber or driver? What do you do?
Never once have I driven to the airport in my professional life.
Did I read that? Is
Why
your
would
story that it's like
The
packed?
parking is packed. People can't find spots. There's
Why are they
almost missing
driving?
flights. Well, I know when we go, sometimes we'll bring our car because if you factor in, we need the extra large, Uber, and then to go back and forth, let's say we're going to JFK or somewhere really far, it's going to cost us ridiculous. But it's cheaper to take the daily rate and leave your car
Really?
there.
I'm surprised by that.
And then you can, kind of leave at your will. You can just kind of go.
All
We
right.
do it like the outside of the airport parking, so it's a little bit even
right.
cheaper than the actual
I always
airport
wondered
parking.
who did that.
But
Now I
that
know.
would be the
Now I
Mateo
know.
family.
So what's the
Mateo
outcome? Are they going to raise the price or build more parking
So
spots?
they're trying to build more parking. That's one of the things, the airports. They're also working to install these guidance systems that help direct you to open spots so that people don't
Right.
wind up missing their flights, because that's the problem. And then Memorial Day's around the corner, so they're trying to put out this warning to people like, hey, you better book your spot ahead of time, which you can also
I
do.
just don't get it.
I had no idea.
That's why
I learned
God
every
created
time she's
taxi
on.
cabs and Ubers, so you don't have to do this stuff.
I mean, I had no idea Lisa Mateo was
Who
surfing
goes
in
to
the
JFK?
Pacific.
You live 5 miles from Newark.
Because you have your points on Southwest, which don't
No,
fly out
no,
of
no.
Newark.
You get your points on United, dude.
I
You live in New
know.
Jersey.
I wonder if Charlie Pellet's surveillance Europe on $5 a
that's
day
a good
correspondent.
question. Yep.
I wonder what
That's a
Pellet
good
thinks
question.
about the
we'll
parking.
get
Next.
his opinion.
Okay. TikTok is testing out 60-minute videos for its app, so that's going to put it in competition with YouTube. So that's the thing that they're working on now. It's a big thing because longer video uploads means more competition for a lot of the streaming services, but it's not clear when this is going to happen. It's kind of in this testing out phase. This is from Business Insider. So it'll be interesting to see because, we've heard so much about YouTube and how, it's at the top of streaming. But now if TikTok starts putting out these 60-minute videos, will that start to put it in competition with the other streaming services?
I don't know why they wouldn't,
know.
actually.
Right.
I don't know why they wouldn't, because the advertising dollars are out there. Well, first of all, as you mentioned from that data we saw from Nielsen earlier this week, YouTube is the second most visited video source in the marketplace after the Walt Disney Company and all their channels. So people are really spending a ton of time on YouTube, and YouTube's selling advertising against that audience. I think TikTok, assuming it can stay in its current ownership, would think about doing the same.
Wow. Would surveillance have to go on TikTok?
We could do that.
Look, it's not going to happen.
It's not happening.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Take a note, Rich. Ain't going to happen. Next.
He's on it.
TikTok.
Let's move on.
Okay, we talked about this yesterday because I was wearing this dress when I walked in, and you commented on Tom. You said,
Well, everybody was
"Great
commenting.
dress."
It was
Everybody
styling.
commented on it.
It's
Got
like
it
we're
at
working with
TJ
it.
Maxx.
She's out of Harper's Bazaar. It's all there is to it.
So the Wall Street Journal actually put out a story about this whole thing, how TJX hauls
It's the
are
best.
becoming this badge of honor.
Best.
I mean, you have people like Bethany Frankel. She's going to TJ Maxx in there looking for these different things. And we're talking Valentino, Coach, Gucci.
So
Always been the
how does a
best.
Valentino product
you.
get to TJX?
They
It
go to all
doesn't
these
sell
stores.
in Bloomingdale's,
Right.
and then it would go to TJX maybe
They're
the next.
usually the older models.
I was gonna say, the next season, if it doesn't sell in Bloomingdale's, it'll go-
exactly,
okay.
exactly.
Okay,
So
so
that's,
that's why you
I
can
got my
sport-
Calvin Klein dress for $30.
That is amazing. I mean, when Calvin Klein's
Is this
designing
turned
that,
into the Lisa Mateo hour?
exactly. Does Calvin Klein think Lisa Mateo is going to be wearing my dress at $30?
This started in Boston, and I have the clear memory of TJ Maxx being different. And they've become ever more different, like you say. And the pros, Dana Telsey, Joe Feldman, Oliver Chen, and others, Robert Burke, who's ginormous within retail consulting, they will tell you there's always been a halo around TJ Maxx. I don't understand it. I think I was in one when Nixon was president. But, all I know is the pros say they're different. Just
Tom,
like
this
you
is a
said
big
it.
company. It's got a $112 billion market cap. It's up 5% this year, the stock is. It's
Yeah.
up 27% over the past year. So it's done well in a tough retail.
Yeah,
You got
it's
one more?
that, It's Marshalls. It's Home Goods. All of them are all TJX.
You got one more?
No, I'm
You
done.
going to Costco this weekend?
No, I'm going to TJ Maxx.
You're going
Yes,
to TJ Maxx
TJ
this weekend?
Yes.
I'll post some pictures for you.
Oh, I think Valentino, but actually I sort of see Celine. I could see Lisa.
Yep.
Rocking Celine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
like
TJ Maxx, I didn't know.
Lisa
walked out of there
Mateo.
with 3 dresses.
Lisa Mateo in charge of the newspapers on this Friday. Futures up 2, Dow futures up 6 as well. Had a lot of fun with Neil Young yesterday off of the Secretary of State playing Neil Young. Here's someone who's a giant. His name is Mike Campbell. You know him from Tom Petty. You know him from all sorts of session work. He's hugely in demand. He's out with a new hit. We'll play it later. Mike Campbell with a guy named Henley.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance on a Friday to get you into May, to get you to June 12 and that Fed meeting. Dow 50,000 on the horizon. We're looking for that at some point. Social, we're out on Android. We're out on Apple CarPlay. Download the Bloomberg Business app for free. YouTube, we're YouTube nuts here right now. You know, they said to me, let's do this on YouTube. I'm like, yeah, right. 12 people will watch. Wrong, Tom. We are humbled by the success on YouTube. Go out to YouTube, search Bloomberg Podcast, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's there. Lisa Mateo. I mean, it's her photo.
Camera's always on Lisa. Even when I'm talking, the camera's on Lisa.
And then there's a replay, 2 hours, 56 minutes, and some other stuff. Carol Masser has a huge visibility there.
Yep. Perfect.
She owns the afternoons.
She does.
No question about that. Let's get right to it. I got some important guests here to drive forward your look ahead into the weekend and forward. Bloomberg Surveillance, brought to you by CohnReznick Advisory Assurance Tax. CohnReznick can help your business quantify its financial exposure using risk-based strategies and analytics. Visit CohnReznick.com. Thank you, CohnReznick, for really decades of support of what we do here. CohnReznick, I'll spell it, CohnReznick. The Bloomberg Business Flash, futures up 2, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And futures begin the last trading day of the week. A little change, but it's still near record territory after the Dow Jones Industrial Average hit the 40,000 mark before starting to pull back. So we have NASDAQ futures at the 18,667 mark, Dow futures at the 40,000 mark, and S&P futures at 5,321. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that is up about 1 basis point. What's moving the markets? It's GameStop. Those shares are down once again. They're down more than 21%. The company filed a mixed security shelf, also reported a drop in preliminary first quarter net sales. Quite a difference. Now we have AMC. They're down about 7% right now. Social media company Reddit, they're up 10%. The company made a pact with OpenAI to bring content to ChatGPT and other products as well. And software maker Snowflake in talks to acquire startup Reka AI for more than $1 billion. Those shares, though, they're down about 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
We're going to bring in our next guest here. Of course, our theme today is surfing out on the West Coast. We did that. Thank Kevin Gordon of Schwab. Thank you so much for helping out on that. Sweeney's got Offspring surfing this weekend out on the West Coast. Joining us now from Newport Beach, Anthony Crescenzi. Tony Crescenzi, iconic in short-term paper particularly, but also Bill's notes in bonds. At PIMCO in Newport Beach, I mean, in the old days, were Bill and Mohammed down at the wedge surfing?
Well, I see Mohammed across the hall on television
Really?
right now. I'm excited.
I'll
have to say hi.
It's like a PIMCO nexus here
Well,
right now. Do you guys surf out at PIMCO on lunch
I can't
break?
swim. I have a place in the Caribbean. I have a place in the Caribbean, Turks and Caicos, and I have to wear a life jacket anytime the water's above 5'11", my height. I cannot
You're
swim.
from Staten Island.
Look, it's a concrete jungle. Anyone from New York's in a concrete jungle.
Come on.
It's all concrete. I learned to swim in a 4-foot above ground pool that's 12 feet long, so I really couldn't.
Okay, Paul, save us. Ask a bond question.
Let's go to the bonds here. I mean, for the longest time, we had no interest in talking to the PIMCO people. Interest rates were at 0. Now we can't even get a phone call returned because everybody wants to talk about bonds here. Tony, we've got real interest rates out there. There is some significant carry here for a lot of people. What's kind of the 30,000-foot view from your perspective at PIMCO? What are you telling clients to do with their fixed income investments?
Well, it's like a nirvana for an active bond manager. It's like a global bond buffet. There's so much to do. Right. It hasn't been a global bond market in a long time because, as you said, interest rates were low, and they were low everywhere. In the 2010s, near zero, pinned near zero. So there wasn't much to do. Now there's so many things moving around like butterflies. You simply take your net, try to find the good ones, and put them in your collection. So we'd say that lower your fears and anxieties. First, I'd say there's 3 things not to do. 1, don't try to time the market. Yields are high. They look very good historically. very good versus expected inflation in the 2s, and versus what's typical volatility. So I'd say, generally speaking, you want to be enamored by the bond market opportunities today and lock in today's interest rates. It's total return time. It's time to think about something beyond the yield, potential price gains, and that's what total return strategies are. And that could be, and I don't mean a fund, but I mean the idea of potential gains in prices is what you want, and to put those yields higher, the returns higher.
So where do I go, Tony? I mean, I can just go right outside right now and get a 2-year Treasury at 4.8%. Do I do that, or do I go out and maybe take some more credit risk here? How are you guys thinking about it?
Well, intermediate maturities are probably the sweet spot. And the Bloomberg aggregate, which is a compilation of lots of bonds, it's sort of it's a market cap weighted index, has about 40% U.S. Treasuries, 25% agency mortgage-backed securities, and 25% corporate bonds. The average maturity on that, or duration in fancy bond language lingo, is around 6-7 years. Now, I often call those maturities, especially the 5-year, the long bond of the short end. And if you think the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering short-term interest rates, the 2-year, of course, will rally, but not as much as the 5-year will. Right. And so that'll really get moving when the Fed does.
My chart of the year right now, I haven't decided yet, and somebody gave it to me. Thank you out on Twitter. I'm stealing it from you. Is the yield to worst, the old Lehman Barclays, now Bloomberg index, the global yield to worst. Tony, it's out 7 standard deviations off the Volcker Great Moderation. We've had this shift in the bond market. Do we recover to some form of trend of the Great Moderation, or are we resetting a new vector?
Well,
for
the bond
total
market
return?
thinks it's a new vector. Looking at SOFR futures,
What do you think?
overnight futures, I think the likelihood is that interest rates, the 2010s is the wrong analog for thinking about the future, meaning that it's more likely that we go back to the yields of the past, than we do the 2010s. But not as high as the market's price. The market thinks the Fed won't lower its policy rate less than 4. The rest of the decade,
to close
barely
the
less than 4.
loop, the real solution here, which is iconic in your book, folks, it's 1,200 pages. Only Lisa Mateo's read it. Tony, the loop here is the x-axis solves everything. Time will heal the return to wherever that yield vector is going.
Yes, in fact, the simple idea is that the stated yield is, of course, the likely return. So if you see on the Bloomberg aggregate, 5 1/8 of 5%, that's likely to be your return over 5 years. The starting yield is the major determinant of your future returns. There are things that could happen, could sprinkle in some alpha and such, but that's the likely story. And given now here's really the most important thing to think about. Price stability and the Fed, credibility, the ability to knock the inflation rate down. If you think it's going to get the inflation rate into the 2s, a yield of 5, historically, relative to that, is very good. Now, remember what Chair Powell said recently. He was asked, would you be satisfied with inflation at 3%? He said you shouldn't use the word satisfied and 3% in the same sentence. And you should believe, and here's the adage, don't fight the Fed. Don't fight the Fed means believing in its eventual success. It will be able to get the inflation rate below 3% and keep it below. And it is already for the gauge of
You're a bond guy. We don't care. What's Tiffany Wilding think? Does she think we're going to get to 2.XX like Clarida?
The economics team does, and I give you one really strong reason to think this. And I was reading back at Irving Fisher, 1933, Debt, Deflation Theory of Depression.
Irving Fisher.
Irving
this is
Fisher.
Not Stanley Fisher. This is Irving Fisher.
Trying to understand the Great Depression. The key is loan growth. In the end, banks are factories. They make money. They're the only entities that can. Private credit entities slosh money around that was already in the system. And loan growth in the United States since the bank stress of 2023, really meager, 2%. In Europe, flat to negative for the past year and a half. You can't have strong spending in the long run with the factories not printing money.
I got 30 seconds. Can you put Philip Knight into this, or Chicago? If we could quote Irving Fisher, can we get Knight or Schumpeter into this?
Just do it, I guess.
Okay.
Invest in bonds. Lock in these yields. Don't get stuck in cash.
Can we get you
Please,
swimming
someone help me. I
Turks
can't. I do the doggy paddles within seconds of reaching 6
Lisa
foot of water.
took me from a beginner to an advanced intermediate Red
It's
Cross
so embarrassing.
swimmer. It was great.
I wear a life jacket 6 feet out in the water. It's crazy.
We got to work on it. Anthony Crescenzi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
He's with PIMCO. Smart stuff there on yield, and we'll get Tiffany Wilding on to straighten out the PIMCO dialogue. Futures up 3. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, Lisa, severe thunderstorms have hit southeastern Texas for the second time this month. Houston's mayor says at least 4 people are dead. There have also been windows blown out of high-rise buildings, downed trees, and power outages for more than 800,000 customers. Houston Fire Chief Samuel Pena.
The majority of our calls have been gas leaks and down wires. Okay? If you smell gas inside your home, please leave the area and dial 911 from the outside. Especially if the power is down, when that comes up, if you're smelling gas inside your home, it could be potentially hazardous.
No school today in Houston. A late-night hearing of the House Oversight Committee turned chaotic as Republicans advanced a contempt resolution targeting Attorney General Merrick Garland. It's for the Biden administration's refusal to turn over audio tapes of the president's interview with special counsel Robert Hur. It turned ugly when Texas Democrat Jasmine Crockett became the target of an insult from Marjorie Taylor Greene when she said, "I think your fake eyelashes are messing up." New York Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez then called for the words to be stricken from the record, which led to this exchange between AOC and Greene.
Are your feelings hurt?
Her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Democrats demanded an apology from Greene, but the Georgia Republicans said, quote, "You will never get an apology out of me." Masters champion Scotty Scheffler was detained by police this morning for not following police instructions during a traffic jam after an unrelated traffic fatality involving a pedestrian. ESPN said Scheffler, who had a morning tea time, drove past a police officer, and the officer went after his car screaming at him. Once stopped, he was put in handcuffs. Meanwhile, after round one, Xander Schauffele leads at Valhalla at 9 under. Today, we will broadcast live play-by-play after the U.S. markets close on Bloomberg Radio and all through the weekend. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Let us listen.
Rangers doubling it here. They score! They score! The Rangers lead at 4-3. Oh, my goodness gracious. Chris Kreider with a hat trick in the third period.
Only one voice, like John Sterling with the Yankees, Sam Rosen with the New York Rangers yesterday. First of all, I'm depressed. Chris Kreider's 33 years old. He will always be Phillips Andover, Boston College,
Exactly,
and
New
he'll
England.
forever be 24. Why is he playing with the Rangers? And it's just amazing, folks, to get 3 goals in a game. And you can ask Rick, you get one in overtime or this or that, but to get 3 goals in one period under that pressure of coming back, I mean, the only thing I can pray for, Michael Barr, help me here, like the NHL's got to be dreaming, Bloomberg Business of Sports, of Bruins Rangers. I mean, that's all there is to it.
That would be, now, man, that would be great.
And sell a series.
Woo!
Yeah. Oh, that would be cool. Thank you, Rich. We could get Celtics, Knicks, Bruins, Rangers.
We're just going to sell a train for like 2 weeks.
It deserves surveillance team coverage.
Yeah.
What's amazing, can you imagine Lisa after the Mother's Day merch from the Knicks? Can you imagine Lisa like Scarlet Fu head to toe in Rangers merch?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's just a complete natural. Sam Rosen there with just a really important thing in sports, a hat trick in one 20-minute period. Chris Kreider of the New York Rangers. Futures up 3. It's a churn. It's Friday feel. Maybe the sun will come out this month. We'll see. Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are a little changed on this last trading day of the week. We'll head to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's a little change, the 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher at $2,389 an ounce, Brent crude $83 a barrel, WTI crude $79 a barrel. Companies making news, that would be Microsoft, up about 0.1%. Word that the UK will not investigate its partnership with Mistral AI. And Boeing, their shares with a little change right now. This is ahead of its annual meeting that takes place today. Executives likely to face a lot of questions about canceled orders and also safety issues. And I thought this was interesting. Wall Street South is getting its own Hamptons. Yes, a luxury residential oasis being built in the Caribbean. It's only 40 minutes from Miami by boat, even faster by helicopter. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're doing this. It's surreptitious. You're putting this stuff in here about every 6 days to get Sparta to go, maybe we should relocate the show to Miami?
I think so.
Let's
and Mrs.
do it.
Keene, the bags are packed.
Yeah.
Me too.
It's an island. This is
another
like
remote
it's off the pond, like a Bohemian island.
Is this a Ken Griffin production?
Exactly. He made this island,
The
by
problem they
himself.
have is that there's not enough things to do there, so now they have to build like
They
restaurants.
can give Tony Crescenzi swim lessons.
Yes,
Exactly. That's what'll happen. This is a joy. The other day we had Ed Yardenian, and we were talking about C.J. Lawrence. And for those of you younger, like Kevin Gordon was in earlier, the heritage of how we got better at this. And one of the jewels of my Ute was BCA. Up in Montreal, there was this nutso newsletter that you read, Paul. Mm-hmm. You read every single word of it. I think it was once a week, maybe twice a week. Francois Trahan out of University of Montreal got lucky and got to work for bank credit analyst in Montreal between periods of Canadiens hockey. He joins us now with all of his work over the years with ISI and now with Trahan Macro Research. Francois Trahan, what was it like working with bank credit analysts when they truly own the high ground? Everybody read it.
You're going to date me a little bit there, Tom. But when I started there, we published monthly. And well, this is before, the computers we have today. Yeah. And so I think I started before Excel came out. So putting charts together and reports together was very different back then than it is now.
Every word was read. And of course, the heart of it, as we had Lachman Achathan in from Economic Cycle Research Institute, was this phrase, a debt super cycle. Are we, Francois Trahan, beginning a debt super cycle?
Well, I think it depends on how you define it. I would say that historically, and I think this is true for governments and companies, debt is one of those things that doesn't matter until it's the only thing that matters. And that tends to happen in periods of slower growth. So for companies, for instance, when earnings are under pressure, that investors care about debt. When the economy is growing, nobody's really focused on that stuff. And it's not that different for governments. If you look at the history of government fiscal crises, again, they rarely happen when the economy is growing. It's always in a slowdown that those issues come to light. And a slowdown is very likely in the wake of Fed tightening. So I think it's very possible, to answer your question, yes.
So, Francois, when you step back and think about investment opportunities here, I mean, we've got the equity indexes, at or near all-time highs. We've got, you can actually get a nice coupon out there in the Treasury market here. Where do you start when you think about this market and where to go?
Well, to me, listen, we're always thrilled when we see a new all-time high in the market, and we always celebrate it. But this recent recovery was very different than, where we got to the prior highs in late March. The two best performing sectors this quarter are utilities and staples. And so it's been defensive. Yep. Or what I would call a risk-off rally, if you will. And I think there is a message in that from the markets, which is that, maybe the economy ahead is looking a little iffy. And so some investors are starting to hedge that risk to a certain extent.
Although it's interesting, a lot of folks will come in here and say, I'm buying utility stocks because I think it's an AI play.
Well, that would have been true 2 months ago, and nobody was buying utility stocks, you know, 2 months ago.
Yep.
I think, listen, utilities, and this is the problem anytime you're pitching, a difficult story, is I'm, listing things to investors that make them yawn, like you want to buy utilities, you want to buy treasuries. And so I think investors need a good narrative to own utilities comfortably, and attaching it to AI, the sexiest story in the markets right now, is one way to do that.
All right. So again, as we try to step back here, what do you think this Federal Reserve is going to do, given maybe some of the economic data we received this week as it relates to inflation?
I think what the Fed can't say, but that they obviously know, is that the best cure for inflation is a recession. Now, they're not going to say that outright, but slower growth is typically, we used to say a recession is a healthy phenomenon back in the day. It's not considered polite language anymore. And so, and when you look at what's changed year to date, leading indicators of employment have deteriorated significantly. I would say the more reliable ones in particular. So I think the Fed's going to get the data points, that justifies changing their tune. And I think they will be cutting rates significantly, but starting before the end of the year.
But Francois, you bring up something it's profound. This goes to all your acclaim with institutional investors and all that. Recessions used to be part of normal. Corrections used to be part of normal. Dare I say, a legit bear market of negative 18%, or even every once in a while negative 30%, was normal. Are we afraid of normal now, Francois, by the invention of financial media? Have we run into this immediacy of analysis where normal has become something truly to be afraid of?
Yeah, I think the exact phrase was that a recession was a cleansing mechanism for the economy. Yeah. The issue is that, we've lived in ZERP for so long that I think it has altered people's perceptions. And the reality is almost 60% of people working in the industry today weren't around the last time the Fed raised rates significantly, so between 2004 and 2006. So if you haven't lived through that and seen all the surprises that come along the way, I think it's a lot easier to believe now that everything will be fine, that this is a soft landing, that somehow all these rate hikes don't matter.
So what do you do with cash? We're going to have to run here, but what do you do this weekend with cash? How do you deploy it?
Well, I think treasuries are really appealing at these levels. I'm not going to lie. And that's typically the go-to when you are at a peak in the Fed funds rate and you're waiting for the Fed to change their tune. So at these yields, to me, treasuries are almost a no-brainer. Within the equity market, it's very normal to see a change in market leadership take place. So I like the utilities. I like the staples. I like all the low beta, boring stuff.
Is Brian Nick doing okay? I mean, was this a good idea?
He's doing great.
I mean, he's working out.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
I mean, it's amazing. You go to Dartmouth and you can actually create, 2 paragraphs back to back. It's amazing how that works. Francois Trahan, working with Brian Nick at Trahan Macro. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Today, Paul, what Francois said there is profoundly important.
Yeah, I mean,
down 10% was normal.
Yeah.
Nobody got hysterical.
We had a 5% pullback here in April, Tom, and I guess, with a little bit of hindsight here, I guess that was it. I don't know. We're moving higher. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll see how these trades. But the earnings cycle we just finished, Tom, I think most people would say it was a pretty solid earnings season there.
Yes.
Can you put that in context with, or put it together with what we think is going to be an easing Fed? That's pretty constructive.
My look ahead here, Paul, is we had a lot of stimulus.
Yep.
Is in every textbook. Most of the stimulus benefits the haves.
Yep.
And we had a financialization, an asset buildup due to stimulus. Where's the now what? Is it like when the Rangers beat the Bruins, or is it like 2025?
Yeah, it's exactly. So where do we go from here? And I'm looking at the S&P earnings, and they have earnings accelerating into next year. So maybe that will be the support for this market.
Do you know Lisa Mateo gets the love notes? I get the hate mail.
Yeah.
I did the Rangers thing. Okay, I was briefed in, and I didn't mention Mark Messier in 1994. The hate mail has been, it's just, I'm sorry, okay? I'll mention Mr. Messier. Maybe we can get Mr. Messier on. Rangers Bruins would be just fabulous. Bloomberg Surveillance. Stay with us.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. NASDAQ, Dow, S&P futures, all little change this morning on this last trading day of the week. We head to the bond market where the 2-year yield is at 4.79%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up a basis point. As far as commodities concerned, we have spot gold higher at $2,388 an ounce. We have Brent crude at $83 a barrel and WTI crude at $79 a barrel. With currencies, a dollar stronger, Japanese yen, euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up 1.5% at 66,309. To earnings we go. Applied Materials. Its forecasts didn't live up to expectations after the stock's 32% year-to-date rally, but shares, they're on the rebound a bit. They're up about 1%. And after a 2-day, $7 billion wipeout, meme stocks, GameStop, AMC, they continue to fall. Adding fuel to the fire now, GameStop's preliminary first quarter results missed estimates. It may also sell up to 45 million shares of Class A stock. Now, GameStop down about 22%, AMC down 4%. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lindsey Mateo, thanks so much. Quiet economic day is typical on a Friday, other than like jobs report. We'll get that out there in June-ish. But next week, we go into some serious stuff. Existing home sales, new home sales, the usual. Claims always on a Thursday. There's some Michigan sentiment stuff in that. Durable goods, I'm not sure I care. But can I say that next week's economic data is on May 22nd when a small company called NVIDIA reports? I mean, that's like more than just the earnings report.
I think it is, Tom. I mean, I think it's been a big part of the market narrative here on AI. It's been the poster child for AI. They really caught the market's attention about 18 months ago, Tom, when they put out that revised higher revenue estimate that just blew the street away. And they said, hey, this is all coming from this investment called AI. And people latched onto that in a big way. The stock's up 90% this year alone, up 212% over the trailing 12 months, Tom. That's been the poster child for AI.
Pre-pandemic, I'm going to center tendency at $3.5 billion in free cash flow. Their printed free cash flow has gone from 3.5 beginning of the pandemic, out to 27 billion. 3.5 to 27. And the model for 18 months out is 55 billion.
Unbelievable.
What you need to know, folks, is I've never seen that. I mean, never.
No, I don't. And it's just extraordinary, Tom. And again, the Wall Street, I think the average investor said, I just have to be in this name. They dove into the name. We see that in the stock price. And now investors, again, for the last 18 months, we see it time and time again. They're saying, where else do I get exposure? Is it in the other chip makers? Okay, AMD and so on and so forth. Maybe not Intel. Is it in the software companies? Okay, Microsoft. I'll play that. And now we were talking about utilities. One of the reasons utilities are up this year is because investors are saying it's a tangential AI play. If you're going to need all these server farms all over the country, you're going to need to power them. They're going to need a lot of energy. Let's buy utilities.
And that's kind of the utility pop that we've seen.
Alex Steele has been all over this, talking to utility companies and energy companies.
I go back to the thermodynamics of it. We don't have time to talk about that now. Now is our most important interview of the day. Stop what you're doing, and we're going to do this very carefully. Lindsey Piegza works for Stifel Outlier. I'm kidding. That's an economic firm out in the Midwest. And Lindsey has staked the ground that this is a Fed that's going to be higher for longer and even raise rates. Lindsey, an update on your research notes at Stifel. Do you still believe that Jerome Powell will need to raise interest rates?
I think right now, looking at the inflationary environment, it's clear that inflation is very sticky and will likely remain noticeably above the 2% target for quite some time. Now, the committee should take that as an indication that they stopped short of a sufficiently restrictive level and take further action, meaning re-engage in rate hikes. But Tom, I'm not confident that they will. Listening to the latest message, it feels as if they'd rather remain on the sidelines, keeping this current elevated level of rates in place and wait for the improvement to happen more organically.
The real rate, the 10-year real rate's what I use, Lindsey. I'm sure you've got stuff better than me, 2.08%. Right now. It didn't move all that much off this inflation nirvana of the last 10 days. Where are the tip points? Where's the bracket, if you will, around the real rate that will force the Fed's hand?
That's a good question because we didn't see much movement, even with the market cheering that cooler than expected CPI number. And given the fact that I don't see inflation moving much, and in fact, nominal rates I think are pretty much range bound at this point, it's difficult to say what the threshold of pressure will be on the Fed. Because the Fed has been very clear that they're focused on policy easing. So unless we saw a material backup in inflation, and I don't mean 0.1 of a percentage point, it would probably be in the range of 0.5 percentage point, if not more, only then would the Fed really feel as if they're backed up into a corner to take further action to reengage. They're going to fight that prospect as much as possible as it forces them to admit a second policy error on the back end after a first round policy error of holding crisis level accommodation in place well past it was appropriate, waiting at those low levels till March of 22.
Lindsey, if the Fed does stay kind of consistent here at these levels in terms of rates, is that going to be enough to slow down inflation? Will that be perhaps enough to push this economy into maybe a recession, which will certainly take care of inflation?
Well, I do think that at these rates, we're going to continue to lose momentum. We've already seen the economy slow from 5% to 3%, let's call it at year end, to sub 2% at the start of the year. But quarter to quarter volatility aside, I do expect the U.S. economy to remain in positive territory for 2024, bouncing around a 2-ish% pace. That's not enough to bring down inflation in and of itself. But that being said, momentum is waning. Consumers are feeling pressure. Businesses are feeling the weight of higher costs, higher borrowing costs. Now, at this point, consumers are still spending, businesses are still investing. But again, it's that second derivative decline. It's that loss of momentum. So the bigger question is, where do we go as we turn the calendar page into 2025? And if we continue to see this loss of momentum with growth slowing to maybe a non-accelerating pace or at least falling below the bare minimum that you would expect for a developed economy, well, at that point, if the Fed is still tolerating above target inflation, my bigger concern is now not a recession or a downturn, but a period of stagflation. Slow growth, elevated prices, that's going to make it very difficult for the Fed to stimulate the economy and get us back onto a longer term trajectory of prosperity, given this conundrum of low growth, high inflation that really leaves traditional monetary policy metrics less than robust in terms of their impact on the economy.
Hey, Lindsey, this week we also got a weaker than expected retail sales number. Some folks are telling me, don't worry about it. We had some good sales numbers out of Walmart yesterday. What's your take on this consumer?
Well, certainly exacerbating the market's optimism for nearer-term rate cuts was that softer than expected consumer spending report, because the prospect of slower inflation is certainly more convincing when domestic demand appears to be slowing in tandem. But I'm not necessarily convinced that that's what we're seeing, a material slowdown in the consumer, as the annual pace still remains very solid. So yes, month-to-month volatility we are seeing as consumers shift the goods and services in their basket. But on an annual basis, 3% is still indicative of a very solid, resilient consumer.
I agree with you completely. Lindsey, a really important question. If we get a Piegza market and inflation is sticky and we have a two-part America, do the haves, the people with assets, do they benefit or are they harmed by difficult inflation?
No, I think we continue to see a growing divide between the asset holders and the non-asset holders, because as long as the market continues to anticipate the Fed eventually cutting rates, the market eventually focused on this easing policy, that's going to continue to fuel these asset valuations in terms of the equity markets. And then from a housing market standpoint, which is the other sizable component of growing these asset valuations, well, that comes down to a simple supply and demand. And we came into this housing market cycle at a multi-year deficit. So just by the nature of household formation, population growth, massive flows of immigration, it's likely that we continue to see housing demand outpace supply, keeping prices elevated, and again, perpetuating that divide between asset holders and non-asset holders.
Lindsey, thank you so much. Just brilliant. Lindsey Piegza, congratulations. I can't say enough, folks. You know, in how many conversations do we have a week? Just with Lisa, we have 20.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a blur. I mean, seriously, folks, I can't remember who I talked to 2 hours ago. It's like my kids. Hey, you. Lindsey's the most important conversation we've had.
I think it's out of consensus. It's
out of consensus, intelligent. This is what you've got to look at about inflation. Whether you agree or disagree doesn't matter. Just really, really impressive. Lindsey Piegza with Stifel. Futures, there's a little lift to the market. It's teen Sweeney's, but maybe we get a close above 40,000 today. With our news, in New York City, he's got a fear of missing out. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. Severe thunderstorms have hit southeastern Texas for the second time this month. At least 4 people were killed and more than 800,000 customers in Texas lost power after an intense rainstorm swept through the Houston area last night. Houston Mayor John Whitmire warned Houstonians to stay away from the downtown area.
It's the large, tall office buildings in the Central District that have lost a lot of their windows and glass all over the streets downtown.
Mayor Whitmire is calling on non-essential workers to stay home. Masters champion Scottie Scheffler was detained by police this morning on his way to the PGA Championship in Louisville. Stunning images show him handcuffed as he was led to a police car. ESPN reported he failed to follow police orders following a pedestrian fatality investigation. Police say a pedestrian was hit by a bus on the road leading to Valhalla Golf Club in a lane dedicated to tournament traffic. ESPN says Scheffler drove past a police car and was chased down and handcuffed. The second round was delayed. Meanwhile, after round 1, Xander Schauffele leads at Valhalla at 9 under. Today, we will broadcast live play-by-play after the U.S. markets close on Bloomberg Radio and all through the weekend. Research institutions in the U.S. who accepted money from Huawei may soon face a federal probe. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
2 senior lawmakers blasted the Optica Foundation for secretly accepting money from the Chinese telecommunications giant, saying the move flies in the face of efforts to keep foreign adversaries from compromising U.S. research. Lawmakers want to know what grants, donations, or other outlays Optica received from Huawei and what percentage of Optica's budget consists of Huawei donations. The letter stemmed from a Bloomberg News report that showed how Huawei, which is blacklisted by the U.S. government, secretly funded a research competition that has awarded millions of dollars through the Optica Foundation. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I'm learning all sorts on live chat. Somebody comes in. Thank you out on live chat on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Search Bloomberg Podcast. We got a live chat through the show, which is shockingly smart. Somebody says, hey, stupid, it's FOMO. FOMO started way back, and then Patrick McGinnis, 2004 rather, 20 years ago, you know, it's got to start in Harvard Business Magazine. Sure. You know, that's where it happens. Yep. But it's legit. Do you feel FOMO now?
I feel, well, when I was a trader, I don't mind admitting I was a momentum trader. I figured I'd just go where the money was buying.
But you have a real life. Lisa and I don't have real lives. We just go home and, you know, quick
I wouldn't try to be smarter than the marketplace. You go where the money's going.
Is the buzz out there right now?
I think so.
Missing out?
I think so. I think it's been that way for a long time. And now you've got some fundamentals that actually support it, which is we've got pretty good earnings out there, and we've got a Fed that looks like it's going to lower rates, just a question of when. That's not a bad backdrop.
And the Yankees swept the Twins. The Twins, like Michael Barr, the Twins won like 15 in a row, right?
Yankees are like 14 over 500 or something.
Swept them with a broom.
Just like killed them. I don't know.
And the Rangers.
The hate mail I'm getting on the Rangers. I mean, I may have to go home. It's Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks hovering below this week's record levels as traders kind of going back and forth on U.S. interest rates outlook. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%. Dow and S&P futures are little changed. The 2-year yield at 4.79%, and that's little changed. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up 2 basis points. What's moving the markets? Well, Cracker Barrel now down 11%, reduced its quarterly dividend. It also sees third and fourth quarter results coming below expectations because fewer customers coming through their doors. Take-Two Interactive, they're down nearly 2%. It announced its latest Grand Theft Auto video game. Well, it won't be released until the fall of 2025, which in turn reduced its bookings forecast for the current fiscal year. And finally, Bloomberg reporting the makers of weight loss shots, well, they're in a new race. They're working on potential treatments to make sure people keep their muscle while they shed fat. Companies like Regeneron Pharmaceuticals and Eli Lilly, they've all been looking into it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. The economic indicators and what we do at 8:30, what we do at 8:47, the interpretation of our economic indicators, always brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Thank you, Commonwealth, for the foundational support of what we and Mike McKee do at 8:30. Joining us now, Jack Fitzpatrick, congressional reporter with Bloomberg Government. Jack, I got 8 ways to go, including the rudeness in Congress, but I just don't want to go there.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'm feeling Paul's saying don't go there.
Some of those news stories are rough.
Bloomberg has a brutal story out for the president. This is Mark Niquette, Phil Kuntz, and Stuart Paul. I don't know if you've seen this, Jack, but these figures show why voters prefer President Trump to President Biden on the economy. I'm sorry, Jack, it's a brutal story. Into the weekend, what's the panic at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
I don't know if it's sudden panic, at least, but there's probably growing concern reflected by that story, looking at the averages over Trump's term and Biden's term of just major economic numbers, where on one hand, President Biden focused a lot on trying to keep unemployment down, or rather get it down quickly after the spike during the pandemic. But there are so many other issues, the prolonged period of high inflation, that if you look at all of the averages across the board, there are plenty of things playing into Trump's advantage. The question, I think, is whether voters compare the totality of Trump's 4 years or focus on the end and a mismanaged pandemic. And that's something that is fair to be concerned about from the Biden perspective.
Here's a Biden-Harris campaign spokesman quoted by Phil Kuntz. The president, quote, is leading a great American comeback out of the mess of failure Donald Trump left behind. Paul, I would just cut to the short. We're ready for Dow 40,000.
I know.
It just doesn't jive.
Yeah, Jack, let's go to that point here. I mean, we all hear at Bloomberg, we traffic in the economic data on a daily basis, and we look at again, as Tom was saying, at Dow 40,000. We've got a growing economy. We've got inflation coming down. But boy, that is not the message that seems to be out there among the voting bloc. How does the administration plan to deal with that issue, do you think?
I mean, one, there's a consistent message that is encapsulated in that quote, framing this as they came in a very tough set of circumstances and have steadily kept unemployment low, gotten growth going, et cetera. Two, at a certain point, you're going to have to look at campaign tactics. Donald Trump on one hand, he's got a sort of negative spotlight on him with his legal issues, but he hasn't been pressed on the campaign trail. That may play into the decision to very quickly schedule 2 debates. These two haven't quite gone head to head. So if you're looking at some of the economic numbers and looking at a lot of the polls that show Trump looking strong, that may play into the Biden decision to absolutely try to get on a debate stage fairly early. They didn't want it too late, as the commission had proposed, and make your case directly to the American people. There is still plenty of time for an incumbent president to go into campaign mode and more effectively make his case than what you've seen by May. But he's got a little ways to go.
So, Jack, here in Lower Manhattan, former President Trump is certainly in the news here. Is there any sense in Washington, D.C. that these legal proceedings here in New York are impacting the president one way or the other as we, approach this election?
There's a lot of interest in it on Capitol Hill. That's why you saw a bunch of Republicans go to New York to be outside of the hearing. Whether it affects Trump on the campaign trail is the subject of debate. It's something that's hard to tell, but it clearly has not bruised him terribly, because people, especially Republicans, are looking at the polls and saying Trump looks strong.
So what are Republicans in name only feeling right now? Are they going to show up at the voting booth in November?
I think there's some concern about the degree to which Trump can win over Nikki Haley voters. There's a lot of interest in who the VP pick will be for Trump, and that is a relevant factor in terms of how successfully Trump wins over skeptics who lean toward the Republican side. But there's still a lot of loyalty for Trump among Republicans. There's no doubt, talking to Republican lawmakers, looking at the polls, that the top figure in Republican politics is Donald Trump. He secured that very easily. So there are some questions to be answered, but still, he is, again, the dominant figure in Republican politics.
Jack, thank you so much. Jack Fitzpatrick there with an update on some of our politics into the weekend. Margaret Brennan is scheduled to come up shortly here on Face the Nation. We'll talk to her about the stagger through the weekend. Did you see the conversation? I saw just a glimpse of it. I'm not up to speed on the details. But I'm sorry, I'm going to editorialize, folks. The rudeness that I witnessed in Congress yesterday.
Just when you think it can't reach new
leave
lows.
The names out. It doesn't matter. It's just, what have we become?
Yeah. It's just, again, you think you've seen the new lows, and then the next day you see more. It's unfortunate from any angle, I think.
We'll just have to see on that. Futures up for, I'm sorry, Paul, there's a lift to the tape. I got the VIX in fractionally, 12.29. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen on a Friday here. I mean, Lisa, help me here. When was the sun last out?
That's a great question.
I mean, we're like, it's like Neo-Seattle here.
Exactly. Neo-Seattle, that's a good one. That's exactly. But if you look to the long-term forecast, Tom, which you can now do through this intraweb thing, sunny next week into Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
And for those businesses at the Jersey Shore and elsewhere, that's big.
Are you breaking out the surfboard?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes, of course.
You have a surfboard?
Well, it's my son's, but
he uses it.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Like, do you do the whole wetsuit
I
thing?
do, and I hate doing the wetsuit. I hate doing the wetsuit. But I've done it a few times this winter, but
it's just, okay.
Yeah.
You give surf lessons? Can you see me on a surf lesson?
No, I cannot.
I have the kids give me surf lessons out there, so.
Give me a cocktail with an umbrella in it,
exactly.
and I'll watch you
go.
surfing as well. Paul, you got something in there as well with the New York Times reporting and ESPN as well on this golfer.
Yeah, the Scotty Scheffler, the headline from the NewYorkTimes.com, Scotty Scheffler detained by police ahead of delayed PGA championship. And you kind of get in there, apparently he was in fact arrested.
The word arrested is used.
The word arrested is used. Scheffler was booked into Louisville Metropolitan Department of Corrections at 7:28 a.m. Eastern, according to online records. He faces charges of second-degree assault of a police officer, third-degree criminal mischief, reckless driving, and disregarding traffic signals from an officer directing traffic. So what we thought may have originally been a misunderstanding may be something more here. We'll have to see with further reporting
much
here.
more on that. On the sport, you can listen to Bloomberg Radio after the market closes today. The PGA, we will bring it to you. It just really works on radio. Look for that on Bloomberg across all of our radio platforms. That after the close of trading. We are on YouTube. It has been a record week for us. We are thrilled by that. Today we're celebrating the music of Mike Campbell. We'll play his big hit. He's got a new hit out. It's great. But here's something from the past. Mr. Campbell with his good friend, Tom Petty.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney on YouTube, Apple CarPlay. Good morning on traditional Bloomberg Radio across this nation. Coming up in a moment, Margaret Brennan scheduled to darken the door, and we'll talk about the politics of Washington. But far more than that, we're talking about there's so many different stories around economics, finance, and investment. Paul, I love the YouTube live chat. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Search Bloomberg Podcast on YouTube, and you too can take part in this live chat. And this guy out here, he's confirming what I'm seeing with copper to the moon. People are out there stealing
I've
copper.
heard
Like they're like walking, they're looking at Sweeney's pool at the beach. He's got the beach and he's got the pool up behind the house, and the copper flashing on your house is at risk.
Copper's up 24% year to date, Tom. I mean, you put that along with cocoa, which is another story in the commodities front. We might be running out of chocolate coming up. That's how bad it is.
And actually, somebody reaffirmed that this week in the Zeitgeist. I'm sorry. On Friday, the head's a little bit, a blur. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning. We're brought you by BNY Mellon Insight. BNY Mellon Insight, June 4th to June 6th in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit Insight, INSITE.BNYMellon.com. We thank BNY Mellon for their support. With our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We got a slight lift to the markets after the Dow hit the 40,000 mark yesterday before pulling back. More economic data, Fed speak, that had something to do with it with yesterday's record push. Several policymakers, including Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester, said the Fed should keep borrowing costs higher for longer. On the calendar for today, we have the Conference Board issuing a report on the U.S. economic outlook. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up 2 basis points. What's moving the markets? GameStop shares heading for a third day of declines, down 19%. The company filed a mixed security shelf and also reported a drop in preliminary first quarter net sales. We have AMC, they're down about 2%. And social media company Reddit up 11%, made a pact with OpenAI to bring content to ChatGPT. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Joining us now, preparing for a 6-hour show Sunday morning. It'll be on CBS, across the CBS News Network. Sunday morning, Face the Nation, hear it on Bloomberg Radio Sunday afternoon. And folks, if you want to get the frenzy of the Margaret Brennan life and the political life of this nation, just go to the Twitter feed, the X feed, at Face the Nation, and you can just see them, the micro stories that we really don't cover that Margaret Brennan's forced to cover. Margaret, I'm going to go to Scott McFarlane. He's in the hallway with Mitt Romney. Full disclosure, is one of my favorite people. Forget about the politics. But Scott McFarlane is with Mitt Romney talking about the Republicans going up to do the courtroom walk with the former president. Do you cover that on Face the Nation Sunday?
No, probably not. But we will.
Why not? Why? That's riveted the nation. I mean, we're just exhausted by it, right?
We are. Everyone's exhausted by it. Exhausted by the lack of seriousness among some lawmakers, the infighting, the criminal trials of the Republican frontrunner certainly are going to be part of a conversation in some form or fashion in terms of his candidacy. But it is just it's a tremendous news cycle we are living through, Tom. It is frenzied.
What are you and your producers here as of 9:04 a.m. on Friday? What are you guys thinking about your Sunday show? I know that the script, as Tom can say, can be ripped up at any time. How are you thinking about your Sunday show at this point?
It's true. Well, we have J.D. Vance, who's on that short list of contenders to potentially be a running mate for Donald Trump. The junior Republican senator from the state of Ohio will join us. We'll talk to him about a number of things, including the economy. He has a non-traditional Republican view. He's really more of a populist. We understand what is that policy platform they're running on exactly. We've got Bob Gates, more of a traditional Republican
Wonderful.
stalwart, though he's worked for Democratic administrations as well. We want to talk to him about the national security picture. The ambassador from Ukraine, Oksana Markarova, will be with us as well.
You are slotted in and for a vice presidential debate at CBS.
Potentially.
July 23, August 13th, potentially is the operative word. Everybody assumes the Republican candidate is going to get a VP swing state. Vice President Harris isn't from a swing state, is she?
No, California is presumed to go Democratic. She's not from a swing state, but she is someone who has been out there advocating for the president on some of the more contentious issues and the things that he frankly doesn't feel comfortable talking about, like abortion. She's the main messenger, and that is something that Democrats hope will be helpful to them across ballots in many, many states. We're going to talk about the polling we see in Arizona and the state of Florida on Sunday's program on those two issues. So, that may be a counterweight. She is also from a key demographic. Black women have been really helpful for Democrats. It certainly were to Joe Biden in this past election. We'll see if that enthusiasm is still there. He's going to be down in Georgia and in Michigan this weekend campaigning.
In the middle of May, Margaret Brennan, I'm going to bring this up a huge number of times. We've covered it in 3, 4, 5 interviews already. The heritage of 1968 Chicago is the heritage of the CBS television network, of a guy named Rather on the floor and the rest of it. How are you preparing for the protests that could be in Milwaukee and Chicago?
Yeah. Tom, it's serious. And, I was talking in these past few days because I just went through some hazardous training myself. And, you think of that people do to prepare to go to war zones and report. There are people going through training who are just going to cover protests in the United States, going through hazardous training right now. That is the kind of thinking that reporters are doing as they prepare for what could be violent protests in front of both conventions, certainly, but also the concern about the political violence that is possible in this very contentious election year, especially given the issues we saw with the transition of power in the last election. This is strange to think of in the American sense. But
well, thank you so much, Margaret Brennan. Of course, Sunday morning across the CBS television network, you can hear Margaret Brennan in Face the Nation Sunday 2 p.m. in New York, Washington, D.C., and Bloomberg 106.1. Boston Newburyport. It's become one of our most popular things. Sunday considered conversations with Margaret Brennan in Face the Nation. That's a wow statement from Ms. Brennan, Paul. The idea that, they're going through training for some forms of violence and that. It's not pretty. No. Jim Bianco was riveting. I mean, I don't know. He's from Chicago. And, he said there were 5,000 people in 68, and I believe Mr. Bianco said the zeitgeist of institutions in Chicago is 30,000.
Yeah, and
I don't know what to make of it.
No, you don't. You certainly don't want a repeat of what happened in 1968. And the folks that don't know it, go Google it. But in the world we live in now with social media and the ability to get ideas out there, very difficult.
We got to get ready for Lucas Shaw. He's coming up here in a moment. Yeah. Paul, the Hollywood that's out there, it's gone.
It's
that's my first
different.
question.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The traditional, media landscape that I think has been around for generations, i.e., you make a movie, you put it in the theater, then maybe you put it into some of these, an HBOs of the world, and then it streams on some of the cable networks, and then it goes on to broadcast television as a rerun a couple of years later. All that we grew up with, and all the economics that brought to global Hollywood, that's really been fractured as we deal with this switch towards streaming.
And help me with this. I mean, Lisa, jump in here. Last summer, they got lucky with Barbie and the Oppenheimer movie.
Yep.
Does that pixie dust happen again this summer? I just don't. I'm not feeling the love.
No, and they're saying what's also failing are the superhero movies that used to bring in so much money for these box office.
Yeah.
They're not doing it anymore. People are not into the superhero movies as much as they were before.
It's one of the things Bob Iger said about some of those franchises that worked so well for Disney for 15 years, the Star Wars, the Marvel, or the Pixar. He says we seriously need to rethink how we make movies with these franchises, because we may have overdone it, may have oversaturated it, and they're trying to deal with that.
We're getting through Friday here. We're trying to figure out what to do for lunch. Michael Barr, seriously, has had an exhausting morning with a couple developing stories. With our news across the nation, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. And like you said, we have developing news. We have more now on that story about the latest involving the world's #1 golfer, Scottie Scheffler. According to the New York Times, Scheffler was arrested this morning by police ahead of the second round of the PGA Championship while attempting to drive around a traffic stoppage outside Valhalla Golf Club. Traffic had been stopped because of an unrelated crash that killed a pedestrian hit by a bus around 5 a.m. ESPN's Jeff Darlington.
What he believed to be security ended up being police officers. They told him to stop. When he didn't stop, the police officer attached himself to the vehicle. Scheffler then traveled another 10 yards before stopping the car. The police officer then grabbed at his arm, attempting to pull him out of the car before Scheffler eventually opened the door, at which point the police officer pulled Scheffler out of the car, pushed him up against the car, and immediately placed him in handcuffs.
ESPN's Jeff Darlington says there's a video that shows Scheffler in handcuffs being escorted by 2 police officers. Other stories to talk about now. Meanwhile, after round 1, Xander Schauffele leads at 9 under. Tiger Woods at 1 over. Today, we will broadcast live play-by-play after the U.S. markets close on Bloomberg Radio and all through the weekend. Severe thunderstorms have hit southeastern Texas for the second time this month. Houston's mayor says at least 4 people are dead. There have also been windows blown out of high-rise buildings, down trees, and power outages for more than 800,000 customers. Acting Police Chief Larry Satterwhite says police will patrol businesses across the city day and night.
For those of you that have businesses that you feel like possibly were damaged or something like that, and you're concerned about the security around that, we have extra patrols out there. We're going to be patrolling shopping centers. We're going to be patrolling dark areas of Houston. We're going to be patrolling things like pawn shops and anything else. We're out there.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Bloomberg Business and Sports. Knicks, they're in Indianapolis. They really don't want to come back for that game where you've got those $6,000 tickets.
Yeah, they really don't. They'd love to close it out tonight. And
yeah.
the big thing for the Knicks really is the health of their players. They have so many players that have been injured, that have been out, that are still hurting. That said, they came back the last game with a blowout win. And the expectation is if Jalen Brunson is at or near 100%, that'll be enough for the Knicks.
I've never seen this. Ready, Lisa? Tickets as low as $493.
As low as?
You can see Tony Crescenzi's Staten Island from those seats. Are you going Sunday?
Unlikely to be going Sunday. Unlikely, unless some of my many friends who could help me out make a phone call.
Friends.
Wow.
There you go.
You know who you are.
Reporting from Boston.
I can get many of my friends to come watch it on my television set at my house, but that's about it.
You're good. Can we do a major shout out? We pride ourselves, folks, on aggregating the news from all different news sources, and led by Bloomberg News Worldwide. And you got to put it together in real time. And that's Michael Barr with all of his leadership. Can we do a kumbaya for Ari? Like
Sure.
Ari's doing our YouTube feed.
I know, he's the man.
And he sometimes he shows up at like 6:58. But Ari's been killing it this morning with the Louisville story, the golf story.
Yeah.
From New York City with Ari, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, we're looking at stock futures, and they're a little changed. We have NASDAQ futures up just a tick, up about 0.1%. To the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's a little change. The 10-year yield at 4.4%, and that's up about 2 basis points. A few companies making news. That's Microsoft, up 0.3%. Word that the UK will not investigate its partnership with Mistral AI. And then we have Boeing. Their shares up just 0.1%. It's ahead of its annual meeting today. Executives likely facing a lot of questions about canceled orders and also about those safety issues. And Britain has its first billionaire musician. According to the annual Sunday Times Rich List, Paul McCartney, worth £1 billion, thanks to his 2023 Got Back tour, the rising value of his back catalog, and also Beyonce's cover of the Beatles' Blackbird on her Cowboy Carter album. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Sir Paul, along with a guy named Jackson, invented modern publishing. And he was determined. His show, and Mike Bloomberg was a huge participant in the show at the National Gallery in London, and it's now in Brooklyn. Right now, you can go see Paul McCartney, 1965 black and white photographs. The original, they have the original copy of I Want to Hold Your Hand. But Paul McCartney changed how musicians worldwide get paid. Single-handedly did that with a guy named Michael Jackson at ATV Music years ago.
Sony ATV Music.
Yeah, Sony ATV Music. That was Mr. Jackson. They own the known world as we know it. This is a joy. Lucas Shaw darkens the door. We never speak to him because he's in L.A. and gets in at 3 a.m., you know, the whole thing. And Paul and I are really interested in, like, the death of Hollywood and that. And yesterday, I got a big hug from Michael McCarty over at Michael's, who's iconic in California cuisine, and it's where you go when you're beautiful. I was supposed to go with Gura today.
I know.
You know, Gura's got to be. I mean, there with Jumana the other day, Jumana Bertucci.
Yep.
Michael's is old Hollywood. Is old Hollywood gone? Is there anybody darkening the door at McCarty's place anymore?
In Los Angeles, I would say that there was a generation of chefs that sort of typified Hollywood in the 80s, right? Michael McCarty, Wolfgang Puck, those people. Yeah. Their restaurants are still open. They're still vibrant. They definitely appeal to an older clientele. I don't think that if you were to
Lisa wouldn't go, you know.
If you were to talk to the people running some of the studios, or maybe the new stars, because the fact is most of the people running the studios in Hollywood are the Michaels demographic. I mean, that's one of the complaints in the business right now, is that Hollywood is being run by people in their 60s and 70s, and there are not a lot of opportunities for people in their 30s and 40s to have a chance to make some changes.
Right. We've been talking about Mr. Ripley, and, you know, within your magnificent nose, folks, Lucas Shaw owns a High Ground. When's it come out? Sunday?
Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific.
Do you have your interns type it, or, you know, how's that working?
I write every word.
Okay, we've been talking about, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Steven Zalian and Mr. Ripley.
Yeah.
He did Schindler's List. He's done all this stuff.
Legendary screenwriter.
Tell us about that person in the new Hollywood that we see dying when you look at the stock prices.
Well, if you think about that show, and I think I'm getting this right, that show was initially set up at Showtime.
Yeah,
and then when Paramount basically killed Showtime or folded it into Paramount Plus, that the new boss of Paramount Plus with Showtime, Chris McCarthy, who's now the co-CEO of Paramount, I think decided it wasn't the best fit for what they were trying to do strategically. Look, black and white, period piece, I get it. It doesn't scream commercial. And Netflix, which has more money than almost anyone else to take some risks and pick things up, swooped in and took it. Look, I don't think that show's a huge hit for them. But it certainly is beloved artistically, and we'll see if it gets a bunch of Emmy nominations when those come out over the summer.
So, Lucas, one of the things Tom and I talk about a lot is just kind of where we go here going forward from the media industry perspective. The business, I grew up in the media business, everybody made money. Everybody made money. Now those economics are really up for grabs
Very
here.
challenged, yeah.
And do you think the traditional media companies in Hollywood, you live there, you're seeing it every day, are they prepared to make that pivot? I'm thinking Paramount. I'm thinking Warner Brothers Discovery. What's the feeling in Hollywood, in LA about that?
I mean, look, the mood is pretty dour at the moment because you see the word for a year or two now has been sort of efficiency and economy and trying to cut back and save money, right? You just had Bob Iger come out earlier this week at an investor conference and say, we spent too much money launching Disney Plus. Now, I think that's up for debate. They probably spent an appropriate amount of money, but there's no question that you had a lot of companies, especially the traditional ones, that were seeing their cable networks shrivel. And so they spent all this money on streaming and they haven't been able to make it a profitable business, and they didn't necessarily have the right approach. And so now everyone's pulling back and everyone's scared about that because it's much, much, much harder to get a project made than it used to be.
Let's talk just about Paramount. That's the number one.
Yeah, what happens this weekend, Lucas Shaw? You're wired in.
I keep telling Tom, 5 years ago I could have sold that company with 3 phone calls. Now you can't give it away.
Well, we will probably have an update on that later this morning.
Oh,
that I cannot.
Scoop. No one's listening, Lucas. Whisper.
But you're correct that, look, it's not the most attractive business for people, right? You know, it's the way it still makes all of its money, for the most part, is these cable networks that are getting smaller every year. It has a streaming business that's growing but doesn't make any money, and it has one of the weaker film and television studios around. And so you've got David Ellison, who has a lot of money, and his father has a lot of money. He's now built a decent-sized media business. He wants to buy it, I think, partially because it would make Skydance much bigger and build him a studio, but also because there's legacy there. Most of the other folks who'd be interested, you'd be buying it almost because you like the history of Paramount, not because it's a great business.
And the crushing lack of time that we have because you refuse to get up at 3 a.m. Lucas Shaw, does Tim Cook want to be in Hollywood? Does Jesse of Amazon want to be in Hollywood? Does Satya up north there in Washington, do those tech people really want to play the Michaels lunch game?
I think it depends on how you define Hollywood. So Satya Nadella and Microsoft, they're in entertainment, right? They're one of the biggest video game companies in the world. I don't think they're especially interested in the film and television business, sort of classic Hollywood. Amazon is in it. You know, they have I don't know that they're going to invest at the same level as Netflix, but you know, they have a bunch of sports rights. They're spending billions of dollars on programming. Their Prime Video business is one of the largest in the world. Apple is sort of the big question mark. They have invested a bunch of money, but I don't think they're going to go buy a studio.
Paul's upset. Is Christmas NFL football un-American?
Why? They have Christmas NBA basketball.
Right. That's right. That's competitive. So what happens here with sports? I mean, Netflix, they're starting to go into sports.
Yep.
I mean, one could argue that the future of sports revenue and this value of all these franchises and all these big contracts, it's going to be paid out of Silicon Valley, not Hollywood.
Well, right now the leagues are sort of have the best of both worlds, right? There was a while in scripted entertainment where you had broadcast and cable networks and streaming services and just all this money being spent. And that's sort of where we are with sports right now. You look at the NFL, they're in business with CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, Amazon, YouTube, and Netflix. That's a pretty good place to be.
What about the venue sports? The venue sports that just came out?
Oh,
they just announced it yesterday. The name, yeah.
I'm pretty skeptical of that business.
One last question. We are a walking experiment of YouTube and YouTube TV. What we're doing here at Bloomberg Surveillance on YouTube right now. What's the power of YouTube combined with YouTube TV 5 years forward? Are we going to have jobs in 5 years?
Yeah, because you're living proof that YouTube is a powerful medium.
It's stunning.
YouTube is the biggest media company in the world.
Yep.
And the most powerful one.
They're listening. Keep it up.
YouTube TV is also going to probably become the biggest pay TV distributor in this country in the next 5 years. So yeah, I think you're in good hands if you're in business with YouTube.
Is it monetizing for Google? Like, are they minting money on it every day?
I don't know that it's profitable because they spend a fortune on it. They only
they're giving Lisa.
They only break out the
Lisa
revenue.
Chanel dress yesterday.
But revenue-wise, YouTube's bigger than Netflix. You combine advertising and subscription, it's a massive business. Just not as profitable.
Okay, so Paramount, we should pay attention this morning. Is that what
it will be? An incremental update, but it will be an update.
Oh, incremental.
And did you go to the upfronts this week?
I went to a few of them, yes.
Okay.
Lucas Shaw with Mark Gurman. All I can say, folks, is we have a series of newsletters out. Begin with Lucas Shaw and Mark Gurman on Apple. I just can't say enough about the legit expertise. He's writing it. He's got 4 interns from Pepperdine. One of them is a surf stud, and they're writing that puppy up, getting it out Saturday or Sunday. Lucas Shaw, thank you for the visit as well. Red and green on the screen on a Friday. We need to get the markets open. Fear of missing out in place. Bloomberg. surveillance on YouTube.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, yesterday was a pretty big day on Wall Street. Dow Jones Industrial Average hit the 40,000 mark before pulling back. We had more economic data, more Fed speak. A lot of policymakers said the Fed should keep borrowing costs higher for longer. So what kind of impact will all this have on the markets as we close out the week? Let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500. Not much, up about 0.1%. The Dow, same there, up about 0.1% at 39,923. And the NASDAQ just kicking in now. Little change at 16,708. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.39%, and that's up 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher at $2,400 an ounce, and we have Brent crude at $83 a barrel. WTI crude at $79 a barrel. At the market, got to check in with GameStop. They're down 20%, and AMC down 2%. That's your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
And thanks, Lisa, so much. It was just great to talk to Lucas Shaw about the high points in Hollywood history. And next week, we're efforting Lloyd Christmas, who was, of course, in Dumb and Dumber 2 here a few years back. I mean, Lisa Mateo, when they made Dumb and Dumber 2, that was Hollywood.
That's my favorite movie of all time. I know every word in the movie.
And she freely admits this, people.
I freely admit it to
in
everybody.
public company. And The Rock is not in it.
No. But they have part 2 coming out. I'm super excited about it. Yes, I'll be watching this.
And Paul,
I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years.
To your point, back when we counted this stuff, it popped 50 million cost, and I believe it brought in 170 million.
Sure.
And to me, that's what's missing here. You call it the water cooler effect.
Yeah.
They have to find it.
Yeah, they have to find it.
They have
It's a
to
whole
find the
different
water cooler
Yeah.
effect. So we're having a report Monday morning on the Mateo 700th viewing of Dumb and Dumber T.O. Joining us right now, Eric Friedman on these equity markets. And again, with the Dow printing 39,891, Eric Friedman's at U.S. Bank Asset Management. Eric, is there a fear of missing out there? And I mean more on an institutional responsible manner, not GameStop, but within U.S. Bank Asset Management, are clients saying, let's go, it's a bull market?
Yeah, Tom, people are, I think, in that environment where they've been hanging around in cash and saying, I can get 5 and change % of the front of the curve, but they're also seeing other parts of the market doing very well. So that was the case in 2023. So part of our discussion with clients has been, hey, we get it. There's a bit of nostalgia about yields finally coming back, but there's more stuff to do in the environment. So there certainly is a level of fear of missing out. But the nice part about it right now is that the broadening trend within the equity market means you don't just have to be in tech. So if anything, that's given us more of a decent dialogue with clients to convince them that there's other things to do besides cash and tech.
So, Eric, a lot of folks are saying in the context of a longer-term healthy bull market, you need to see pullbacks from time to time, 5%, 10%, maybe even more than that. Was that 5% pullback we had earlier in, April, was that it for us?
It seems, Paul, to your point, like the dips are shallower. In fact, we use that opportunity to get more aggressive in both equities and commodities. We think there's the non-consensus view that look, there's a risk that inflation just picks up as we get deeper into the year. That's really our view. That yes, we had a decent CPI print. PPI was okay with some downward revisions the prior month, but we do think it's going to be hanging around. And it's not just shelter costs, it's also goods-based inflation. So I think there's a risk that, we get these really shallow dips and then they're bought and then we don't actually get much of a reaction until we get deeper into the election season. So I think that, dips are to be bought until proven otherwise.
I mean, Eric, within our addiction to all this double-digit returns, I mean, some of the mutual funds pull out 5 years. They go to 12%, you go get out the champagne. Some of them are popping 13, 14, 15% annual returns for five years. Even with a pullback from a bull market, Eric Friedman, do you still model an equity actuarial assumption of 6, 7, 8%?
Yeah, Tom, we're in the mid sevens for equities domestically, a little higher internationally. We think that valuation is a benefit to international markets, but they're cheap for a reason. So again, it has been the case that U.S. equities have been for a long time, let's call it the last 10, 12, 13 years, the dominant category in those actuarial assumptions. But we do think that stepping in now and broadening out into non-U.S. equities makes some sense. Again, we'd still favor U.S. overall, but that 7.5% type of return we don't think is unachievable. Also to keep in mind that the most important narrative, and your team has done an outstanding job of covering this, is where does the Fed settle out? Not when does the Fed start cutting interest rates? What is it? Is it June? Is it July? Is it September? That's interesting, but more, where does that level really settle over time? Where is the Fed going to keep rates? And so that when we're looking at our discounted cash flow models, all the stuff that make our propeller hats go fast, that's stuff that really matters in terms of our input. So the end terminal rate, if you will, of Fed funds is very important. That's something that we're spending a lot of our time on as a team.
Eric Friedman of the U.S. Bank, and we will continue. We now turn to surveillance golf crime reporter Paul Sweeney, who's following this story. I mean, this number one golfer has a 10-ish tee time.
Yeah, apparently I'm just kind of reading some reporting here from ESPN.com and others that, again, Scottie Scheffler was arrested, arraigned, but he has been released And so the key issue here is 10:08 a.m. local time, which is Eastern time, is his tea time. And if he misses
so like
that,
32 minutes.
Yeah, if he misses that, he'll be out of the tournament. But maybe he can now make it. We'll have to see. But I'm just kind of following on the reporting. But it's a fluid situation and really unusual.
Our coverage we pick up after the market close on Bloomberg Radio. You will hear the PGA. We're thrilled to bring that to you. The Dow up 8. Eric Friedman, what are people doing with cash? I mean, you've been doing this for years. You're going to tell me a 4% cash holding is part of a properly diversified portfolio? Baloney. What are we actually doing, Eric Friedman?
Yeah, Tom, we actually do not have any cash in our model asset allocation. We
Second
think that
guy
is an
this week.
opportunity cost.
That's a bull market call.
Yeah, we've the triple leveraged all cash fund, Tom. We think that's interesting. That's something that we're not we're not proponents of based on the opportunity cost. So what we're seeing people really buy into, if you will, is even moving slightly out the curve, which is interesting. If you think about municipal bonds, not to get into too much of a wonkish conversation, but the idea that you have a more normally shaped yield curve in munis, which is different. You don't have that same inversion factor that you have within treasuries. So we're seeing people move out into the latter maturities of municipals, which I think is a good idea. We also think that owning other sources of cash flow beyond stocks and bonds, things like reinsurance, things like non-agency mortgages that aren't necessarily off the tip of the tongue for most investors, those are things that we source for clients and think they can be very additive. So those are, we think, reasonable places to allocate. And again, we are not believers in holding cash. We think that there's just too great an opportunity cost over time.
Hey, Eric, Tom and I try our best to stay on top of the global commodities markets, and we've seen a lot of volatility, whether it's cocoa, hitting ridiculous highs. And we see a story today, spot silver. It's outpacing gold on a year-to-date basis, and it's the highest it's been since 2013. How do you folks at U.S. Bank Asset Management Group get, I guess, exposure to real assets?
Yeah, Paul, it's a really important point to focus in. I think that, generally speaking, we like real estate, both public and private, but there's such a large error term on the real estate market right now, which of course is probably a whole separate segment. But, our viewpoint is that there's really two ways to get exposure to real assets beyond real estate right now. One would be to own energy companies, which have been very disciplined. The super majors, the global integrateds have been, again, through shareholder activism, really forced to be more capital disciplined. They've done a good job of that. The second area is to just broaden it out into more diversified sectors. So we actually are buyers of the Bloomberg Commodity Index. That's something that we actually picked up in the month of April, just on weakness, with a viewpoint that you want to have exposure to those things that just, again, aren't as readily available in public equity. So things like wheat, cocoa, dare I say, fresh Florida concentrated orange juice, not that level of specificity, but there's a level of broadening out of inflationary trends that you're not going to get in public companies. So owning commodities, we think, on a more broad basis is the right approach.
Eric Friedman, I got to get back to munis and we got to say goodbye. I mean, I am deep in the skinny atlas of 2026. And it came in a premium. It was trading 115. It's defeased down to 100. It's going to mature here in a couple years. But I got in a 40% tax bracket. We're way above that in New York City. I'm generating 4.88% off your back and skinny atlas. That's a pretty good return.
Yeah, if you tax adjust, and again, a special nod to my hometown, Tom, thanks for that. If you take a look at those tax equivalent yields, and even for those who are willing to go a little bit further down in credit quality, not saying that you need to load up in non-investment grade munis, but you are getting paid, if you will, to lend to municipalities. So doing that across a still healthy revenue environment for states around the country. Right. We think munis are a good place to be.
Did you see the Hinckley picnic boat they picked off at that muni opportunity?
I would love to get one.
Eric, he goes around the lake there in it. Eric Friedman of Skinny Atlas and U.S. Bancorp, thank you. On munis, we don't do enough on munis.
We do in the
10 o'clock show we do.
Yeah, we have a sponsored segment today with the Joe Misek, who is the voice.
He's retiring.
He's retiring, and we're going to make a big deal out of that.
Today's not his last day.
No, we got him through June.
Make a note. Ken, we got to get Joe Misek on the show. I mean, I want to,
history of the
blow it out. We'll do a 1-hour interview. He is the dean of muni bonds. Folks, 10 a.m. this morning. Pay attention, Joseph Mysak, on taking advantage of tax-free bonds.
This segment is sponsored. That's how important.
That's how large he is.
Yes.
Unlike Michael Barr. With our news in New York City, here is Michael Barr.
Thank you, Linda. We appreciate that. There are so many questions about this story now. Masters champion Scottie Scheffler was arrested this morning on his way to the PGA Championship in Louisville. ESPN reports that he failed to follow police orders during an unrelated pedestrian fatality investigation. Scheffler reportedly drove past a police officer in his SUV with markings on the door indicating it was a PGA Championship vehicle. The officer screamed at him to stop and then grabbed onto the car until Scheffler stopped about 10 yards later. ESPN's Jeff Darlington witnessed the detainment of the number one golfer this morning at Valhalla Golf Club in Louisville.
Scheffler was then walked over to the police car, placed in the back in handcuffs, very stunned about what was happening, looked toward me as he was in those handcuffs and said, "Please help me." He very clearly did not know what was happening in the situation. It moved very quickly.
ESPN's Jeff Darlington. Now, Scheffler's been charged with assaulting an officer. Scheffler was at 4 under after round 1. Now, he's scheduled to tee off, as Paul had mentioned, in about an hour from now. We'll see if he can make it. Xander Schauffele leads at Valhalla at 9 under. He'll tee off later this afternoon. Today, we will broadcast live play-by-play after the U.S. markets close on Bloomberg Radio and all through the weekend. Severe thunderstorms have hit southeastern Texas for the second time this month. Houston's mayor says at least 4 people are dead. There have also been windows blown out of high-rise buildings and power outages for more than 800,000 customers. Houston Fire Chief Samuel Pena.
The majority of our calls have been gas leaks and down wires. Okay? If you smell gas inside your home, please leave the area and dial 911 from the outside. Especially if the power is down, when that comes up, if you're smelling gas inside your home, it could be potentially hazardous.
And finally, trucks carrying badly needed aid for the Gaza Strip have rolled across a newly built U.S. floating pier into the besieged enclave for the first time. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, there's a great conversation on muni bonds with Eric Friedman. And I just want to go back, folks, to the Bible on this, which Bloomberg resurrected. I was so honored to be part of this project umpteen years ago. Martin Leibowitz, Sidney Homer, Inside the Yield Book. It's the classic book on compounding and making yield on yield.
Yeah.
It's a little bit adult. There's a little bit of math to it. But that's why you buy muni bonds.
That's why you buy muni bonds. And particularly if you're in a high tax state or in a higher tax bracket and you're looking for some non-taxable income, it's been a big part of my portfolio for 25 years. And now you actually can get, like you can across the fixed income spectrum, you can actually get a coupon now.
Yeah, so it's come back. There's a real yield to muni bonds. We'll do more on that. Joe Mysak in the 10 o'clock hour. From New York City, Bloomberg's surveillance.
the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks are a little changed, but we are on record watch. The S&P 500 number to watch, 5,308. Right now we're at 5,296. For the Dow, it's 39,908. The Dow right now at 39,873. And finally, the NASDAQ, the record to beat is 16,742. Currently, we're at 16,697. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.79%, and that is little change. The yield on the 10-year at 4.40%, and that is up 2 basis points. What's moving the market? Well, social media company Reddit. Right now, we'll check in with them. They're actually going up. They're up 13% right now. It made a pact with OpenAI to bring content to ChatGPT, other products, and also new AI features to its forum, so people are liking that. We have Applied Materials. Did impress investors with its latest forecast after the rally in shares this year, but its shares are up just a tick, about 0.1%. And Take-Two Interactive, it gave a weak full-year forecast at its latest version of its Grand Theft Auto video game. It will be delayed. Those shares, though, they're up about 4%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. I mean, some people come in here, they got an entourage, and our next guest comes in, Mark Douglas, and when you're represented by Mark White, in white label media, I mean, like people, it's like when Clooney comes in. Yeah. People like part, it's
that's
like,
how it works.
Mark White, thanks for bringing in our next guest. This is really controversial, folks. Mark Douglas is with us. He cut his teeth at eHarmony, ruining my marriage. And he joins us now. He's with the MNTN, and we're just going to cut to it. There's this uproar, and I'm directly involved with YouTube and the future of linear TV, streaming, everything our listeners and viewers are dealing with.
Yeah.
So the Wall Street Journal puts out an article, and I thought it was very conventional. I will fault them. They didn't mix together YouTube and YouTube TV together. But you took real issue with where the future of what we watch is going. Where are we going with YouTube?
Well, I think the clarification you made that there's YouTube and YouTube TV, because YouTube is predominantly short form video. It's basically maybe a podcast, but usually, or maybe something streamed, but a lot of it is 3, 4, 5 minute clips. And it's just not conducive to the same kind of like business model as long form. Streaming is episodic programming, things you want to see over and over again, live events, basically what people traditionally consider, what they sit on the couch to watch, right, or lay in bed, what they consider, kind of like their real, true entertainment. They're not in conflicts with each other, but I think they essentially the how you monetize them is very, very different. And television streaming continues to kind of dominate the monetization.
Is YouTube TV a TV network?
YouTube TV is very, very similar to Hulu, so it's kind of the modern day equivalent of cable. It aggregates together all those core things, basically live, like those core things you want. Where am I going to watch the news? Where am I going to watch the NFL? Where am I going to watch kind of other sports? But all of the does anyone know what you would go to ABC to watch? It just doesn't exist.
Jimmy Kimmel,
anymore.
that's it. That's why he was there with Bob Iger.
Yeah, well, so even that's live content, right? Because it's basically
and Jimmy Kimmel's killing it on YouTube.
Yeah,
with his redos. Paul, jump in here.
Mark, were you at the upfronts this week in New York City?
A bit, yeah.
Okay, so folks, the upfronts are the television networks and the cable networks. They get together with their advertisers and they sell a bunch of advertising time for the upcoming season. It's a very important part of the finances of a broadcaster or a cable network, and they happen every May. Are they even relevant anymore?
I am not a fan. I went to the upfronts literally to look at it like I was looking at something from the past.
Okay.
I am not a fan of the upfronts either. I think this entire media industry is a bit strange. I can't think of another industry where you have like 100 big companies pursuing 1,000 big companies as customers.
Yeah.
And like what other, like even cars, like you have sports cars, you have SUVs,
Okay.
they're not all going after the same person.
For our listeners and our viewers, with all of your experience, huge digital experience, can you acquire shares in the companies of Hollywood? Can you buy Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount, CBS, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I think it's really simple. As an investor, if you should play the simple game at home. You should write down the names of all those companies And then in a second, can you name why you would go there to watch that content?
Lisa? Hulu. Lisa, why are you going to Hulu?
Why am I going to Hulu? I don't know. My question is more along the lines of because I'm paying for cable, right? And so my thing is the only reason I'm paying for cable is because my husband wants to watch sports.
Right.
So with all these sports streaming going on, then you hear of Venue Sports yesterday, the name came out.
Yeah.
I mean, can I cut the cord? I mean, finally?
You can cut.
I mean, come
That's
on.
what we were talking about before. You get Hulu or YouTube, you combine it with Netflix, and then name the one. So Disney, children's entertainment. ESPN, sports commentary. But ABC, you'll draw a blank stare.
Yeah.
CBS, you'll draw. And so the answer to your question, if you can very rapidly name why you would go there, invest in that company. If you can't, short that company. That's it.
That's it. How about this? NFL is now streaming. Talk to us about that and what it means.
Well, I think it's kind of this golden age of sports. I think in the backdrop, talk about the NBA. I mean, their sports rights are up, and I know they have big ambitions for what the future is going to look like. And so the NFL is kind of like premier content right now. Everyone wants it. These big that's kind of the relevancy in terms of the upfronts is people want to be part of these big, tentpole events. And so I think the NFL go to streaming. It makes a lot of sense for the reason you said, because a lot of people want to cut the cord. They have no choice. If you want to stay in front of those consumers, you're going to have to go where they are rather than demand they go where you are.
What are the advertisers? Why are they even going to these big upfront events? Are they still allocating money to broadcasting cable television?
It's very, very rapidly shifting. Yeah. So they still are. But what's happening is the networks are hoping to just get when I say networks, I mean the streamers, media companies. They're hoping to just get the same allocation, but get it, now for streaming. I think the big problem with it, like this year, you guys know I've been a big fan of Netflix. Yes. I continue to be a big fan. Yep. But I'm just not a big fan. This was Netflix first upfront of like, okay, so first you launched your TV product and you came out with like the upfront is like launching a 1990s business model, but doing it 2024. Right. Then they announced this year they're going to go programmatic. Mountain is a big player there. And so it sounds exciting, but now you're at 2010. When is 2025 showing up?
Right. So what would be your advice to Netflix as it relates to advertising?
I think what they should be doing is they should be, just like they reinvented the relationship between the consumer and the content, binging, on demand, right, and all that, you got to do the same thing with the relationship with the advertisers.
I got 30 seconds.
New products.
How do we get the water cooler back? How do we get that magnificent emotion of American society back talking about this stuff?
Well, I think there are these big, Netflix generates a lot of them. Cultural events, like Game of Thrones, those kinds of shows where everyone is just so it's that investment in content and now that water cooler is Instagram and TikTok.
That's what I was just about to say. That's where it is now.
Okay. Yeah. Mark Douglas, thank you so much with MNTN. And full disclosure, folks, Paul and I really push for this because, we're doing this experiment with YouTube. And I'm flabbergasted. I did not expect where we are, Paul.
I know.
It's
where the kids are
going. It centers around, it's not about, when Mark Douglas is on, it doesn't spike. It's like it's solid.
Well, we get Mark Douglas
CPI, it spikes.
Let's get a little roundtable with Mark Douglas and Lucas Shaw. How good would that be?
That would be good.
We could get that sponsored.
Yeah, it'd be like a Lucas Shaw event kind of thing.
Yep.
We need to do a massive shout out to our team. This week was extraordinary with CPI. And all the rest. And we just say thank you. On Apple CarPlay, thank you so much. On Android Play, the Bloomberg Business app, and also on YouTube, this experiment we're doing. Search Bloomberg Podcasts, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. We're building that out across the summer and into next year. We're featuring Mike Campbell. He played with Tom Petty. This is brand new. It's blowing up on YouTube. I know that for certain. Mike Campbell, something new.